Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cult Musical Zone. Today, we're doing a double feature talking about two of Prince's cult musical masterpieces, Purple Rain and Graffiti Bridge. We're not doing the sacred trilogy of Purple Rain, Under the Cherry Moon, and Graffiti Bridge because we're talking about Purple Rain and its infamous / underrated sequel, Graffiti Bridge. So, we'll approach this differently than we usually do and talk about basically our admiration and love for Prince and our first time seeing Purple Rain, and then we can lead into Graffiti Bridge. So if you want to introduce yourself, our special guest, and talk about, I guess, your relationship with Prince, but also your first time seeing Purple Rain.
Sure. I'm Paulie DeLarge. I am the producer of the Rocky Horror Picture Show from the Ordinary Kids in New Jersey. Purple Rain. I remember the first time that I saw Purple Rain, and I was, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years old. And I live in the New York City area. So at the time growing up, we had, this is how old I am. Back in the day when we had just basic cable and broadcast over the airwave TV. So I remember watching it with my mom on coincidentally a rainy afternoon, I think maybe a Saturday or Sunday, on a channel called WPIX 11. And that was a New York broadcaster. And they would do these Saturday and Sunday like matinee shows. Like they would just play movies that you wouldn't typically find really on like the three big channels. So Purple Rain was one of them. And I mean, these movies are edited for content, edited for time. But I remember watching it and I was like, wow, this is different. This is pretty cool. I've never seen anything like this before. It was kind of this time capsule of the 80s that, like, as a kid that grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, I knew of Prince, but I didn't know like Prince. Like Prince, when I was growing up, was already sort of like established and was already like not almost like a parody of himself, but he was already at that point when he was using the love symbol as his name. And, the mainstream media, of course, jumps on it and they, turn it and twist it and make it into like a deal that it shouldn't be. And it becomes a joke, a punchline. So Prince was sort of like a punchline to me as a kid because of cartoons, as crazy as that sounds. So seeing like Prince in Purple Rain and just being like, this is great, fun music. And the movie actually has like a lot going on. There's a vulnerability that, like, even as a kid, like I was like, wow, like this is intense. And of course, Apollonia, like beautiful woman that just I was like fixated on. And it was one of those like films that just stuck with me, and it's always been like a favorite of mine. And it was really my introduction to like Prince and Prince's music, as opposed to like understanding him as basically a cultural figure, kind of like Madonna also was sort of like that wheelhouse of being almost a parody of herself by the time that I was growing up.
My interest, so it's really, I have my Prince shirt on. It's really unusual to me because I've always gravitated towards artists who I had no prior introduction to. None of my family members, none of my friends introduced me to artists that I fixated on. So my entire life, it's always been Dolly Parton, Michael Jackson, and Prince. Those three, always my entire life.
Good.
Dolly Parton always all those cluster. Yeah. So they've always been a huge part of my life in different reasons for different seasons. So Dolly Parton's always been that pervading force that's always been part of my life, Michael Jackson as well. But Prince was a huge part of my life when I was about 11 or 12. That's when I started to really get into Prince for no reason at all. Just for no reason at all. I think Prince is, if he's just such a cultural American cultural phenomenon that he's always been part of our consciousness. And I always knew of Prince because of Bat Dance, because I loved Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns. So that was my introduction to Prince. But I don't ever remember a time where Prince wasn't part of the consciousness in America. And
Hmm.
so I remember distinctly when I was about 8 or 9 seeing the VHS at Walmart of Purple Rain and this cover right here, that
Hmm.
beautiful cover of Prince being on the motorcycle and Apollonia in the background. And the logo was so different.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember I want that. And I remember, my family buying me stuff. I mean, they probably thought I was an unusual child because like I would always request movies that or CDs or things that they didn't know where I got this love or fixation from. So I
Mhm.
remember when I was 11, I was at my grandmother's house and I was like, I want to buy Purple Rain. And she was like, okay. And so that was my introduction to Purple Rain. And it grew my love of Prince. And Prince became such an important figure in my life. And the soundtrack. And I mean, a lot of people sometimes equate Purple Rain just with the soundtrack, and
Oh,
they
absolutely.
almost forget that
Mhm.
it is a movie
Yeah.
and that there's fully realized, fully fleshed out characters.
Mhm.
Morris Day and the Time, the kid, Apollonia, even Apollonia 6,
Yeah.
um, Billy the club manager,
Mhm.
Wendy and Lisa. I mean, all of them are such big parts of Purple Rain that sometimes when a soundtrack is so successful, it eclipses the film from which it came.
Yeah.
And I think because Prince, the soundtrack was so popular, and the Purple Rain tour is really popular. All those songs that are brilliantly constructed, almost people forget that Purple Rain is a film. I feel because people, say, "Oh, I love When Doves Cry." Okay, it's in this and this originality, and it's always been unusual to me that it came, but for me the movie was so important, and I used to quote it when I was a little kid, and like it was so groundbreaking to me, and it solidified my love of Prince. And so that was even before I saw Purple Rain, I remember Entertainment Weekly did a spotlight on Prince, and I had the magazine, and it just talked about it had, I think, Dr. Fink or whatever, or
Mhm.
some members of the revolution were doing interviews. And so it was just a weird time when I was in sixth grade, fifth and sixth grade, that Purple Rain and Prince became really part of my life, to where all the way until he died. And there was a moment after he died where I stepped back, I think because I didn't know how to grab it. I didn't know how to grapple with losing him. And so I know it's crazy, but
It
like I
was
didn't know how to
it
grapple
was yeah.
losing Prince.
Yeah, no, it
So it
was a
took
big.
me a few years before I could go back and listen to his music again and read and listen to the new music, because it was very unexpected. But we'll
Yeah.
get into that later. But the movie, to me, it's so unusual that like a lot of blogs and a lot of people who examine cult musicals, they always just sort of just like gloss over Purple Rain. And I don't think people realize how monumental of a movie it was and how much of a big deal it was in terms
Oh,
of this movie, because it really had never been done for a music artist to basically have their life story glamorized, mind you, but their life story told on film. Because Prince, he had quite a few 1999, and he had quite a few hits before Purple Rain, but Purple Rain took him to a level that I think you could only compare him to Madonna and Michael Jackson.
oh,
But I think
absolutely.
Purple Rain pushed Prince even farther beyond Madonna and Michael Jackson, because he was Purple Rain is a very vulnerable movie for him to make.
Yes.
And so, but it's amazing. I mean, we can talk about it being a cult musical and things, but it's groundbreaking. And it's still to this day, I think, deserves more critical reevaluation, and it deserves to be analyzed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're talking almost like 40 years, okay, since like its release, and the fact that it is still re-released. I mean, I'm still seeing T-shirts of it. of something that predates almost two generations of fans, and that is still celebrated in the way that it is. You said it yourself, like it was groundbreaking. No one had done a movie like this before. At least maybe not since like the 1950s with like Elvis doing like, musician fronted films. And that the way that it was done through Warner Brothers, knowing that like they had lightning in a bottle already with a recording contract with Prince. Prince is becoming like, like you said, from 1999, was
To
already
this,
established. He was a star, but Purple Rain made him a superstar. And Warner Brothers knew exactly like, all right, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to have the movie. We're going to have the soundtrack. We are going to put this 24/7 on MTV, which at that time
was a big deal.
was a cultural phenomenon that like had not existed. There was the world before MTV, and then there was the world after MTV. And that period of MTV's golden age is what really made this movie bigger than it should have been. It's similar to like even like how the marketing for a movie like Flashdance was done. They were brilliant marketing campaigns for these films to really reach this, this audience at the time, that it made this thing just big. But it had its laurels. Like not only is the music just incredible, like it is an opera, but it is also a really well-made film. And that you have Prince, who wasn't an actor, bringing a soul to the kid. And it is quasi biographical. It is not the story of Prince, but it is an analog of Prince, that he's bringing it to, the screen. And you are getting a fully realized performance that, it might be cliche to say like he deserved like an Oscar nomination or a Golden Globe, but rightfully so. I think the critical evaluation now is that, the man was a talent and he could act. Around him, maybe the talent wasn't as strong. I mean, as beautiful as Apollonia was, she was not a great actress in it. But with that said, though, she did her part. She was a character, and she was great. And Morris Day is like Morris Day. He is a cartoon,
Well, the thing
but
is,
he's playing it straight, and he's playing it like, in a way that feels organic to the story of Purple Rain. So all these things like, oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I mean, so like all these things are basically like these the perfect storm to create something that is going to be watched and evaluated and eventually loved by a larger audience than that Prince probably had prior to this movie. And it launched him into a stratosphere of becoming a superstar, a global phenomenon, like Michael Jackson, like Madonna. And dare I say, and this is me, just on my opinion, he was a superior artist compared to them. Those are big words to say.
I think they're the trinity of the 80s, because if you think about it, and I was going to make my point, there was nobody except Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Prince. And their lives all intermingled.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, Madonna was the female Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was the female Madonna. Mm-hmm. Prince was the male Madonna and the counterpart, the evil twin to Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
But I think Purple Rain did something that I think, and I'll make the point, I think Michael Jackson and Madonna couldn't do a Purple Rain because Purple Rain left the artist very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And Madonna and Michael Jackson, for all the adulation that they rightly have, two things they didn't like, or one thing they didn't like to be was vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely.
And because, people eat you alive.
Yep.
And so I think that's why Madonna nor Michael could ever do something like Purple Rain, because of how human it makes you look, but also how negative. And the thing is, was so unusual, and it ties into the point I was going to make. The thing that's so unusual about Purple Rain is that it doesn't necessarily portray Prince in the most positive light, and it shows how complex of a human being he is. But also, the people who are in the movie as his band are his real band members, and they're themselves, and they're not necessarily always friends and always getting along with the kid.
Mhm.
And there's something weird. It's in a weird sort of like dimension. It's a very unusual premise. It's not like one of those passion vanity projects of like Barbara Streisand and Elvis, where they're never portrayed as negative. Like
Yeah.
when Barbara Streisand did The Mirror Has Two Faces.
Mhm.
I mean, Prince talks about like how his childhood really and his father really had him mistreat women, and
Yeah.
how there's scenes of him hitting Apollonia. I mean, that sort and how he his relationship with Wendy and Lisa and his relationship with his other band members and his ego, his vanity, but also his vulnerability is something that is so unusual to be done in a biographical film that
Definitely.
it's so unusual. And the time, the time being in there, and the thing about it is those people in the film all use their real names. Like
Yeah.
even the club manager, Billy, his name's
Billy,
Billy.
Billy. Yeah. Everyone is themselves
And
almost.
so
Like,
weird alternate reality to
it,
where if you had a Michael Jackson or Madonna movie, and I don't want to harp on them too much, they're amazing artists. I feel like they would glamorize it and sanitize it in order to sort of pacify their own internal struggles with their
I
past.
I could see Madonna at that time, early '80s Madonna, simply because like she was coming out of the New York scene, out of
Yeah.
like Danceteria and that area where she could possibly do something like that, and she kind of forayed into to film doing darker characters, but for an autobiographical film,
Right. He was
uh,
not at that time being
no,
able
not
to
at
do
the time. And Michael Jackson, like you said, would be persona non grata. Jackson had an image,
but
and
he also was continuously evolving. And
yeah,
Madonna still grappled with losing her mother and her father, her really contentious relationship with her father.
yeah.
Michael still evolved all the way until his death. So he was always discovering who he was. But I think Prince was very self assured of who he was and like, this is me, this is my life.
Mhm.
And I think it was so unusual. I mean, do you not think, I know you do, but like, isn't it so unusual? The plot is just so unusual that like everyone uses their real names.
Mhm.
All of it takes place in Minneapolis. Nothing changed for fantasy. The only thing that's not changed for fact is the only thing that's changed is Apollonia 6 because
Yeah,
Vanity
it's
quit
supposed to be
print.
vanity. Yeah.
That was the only thing that was fictitious.
Mhm. But they
So I
made
mean,
it work organically, and it feels like again like almost like this alternate reality of the Minneapolis scene that you're seeing. But yeah, it is like interesting that like it's almost, you don't want to say quasi documentary, like it is shot specifically as a film. It's not, like a documentary, but they are playing versions of themselves, everybody, in this heightened reality of the kids universe. It is something that you don't really see in film, especially film in the '80s like that, let alone like the type of music that it was doing, because I think we also need to really
oh
set
yeah,
the scene for what the early '80s was. And the music scene, unless you really discovered Prince or artists like Madonna or had MTV, most of the top 40 music was pretty homogenous in the '80s.
oh
It
yeah,
was
and men
either like very like pop or dad rock, and I'm talking
or
dad
glam,
rock like Asia or Journey, or like these.
Def Leppard.
I get the Def Leppard's got a little bit of an edge there, but
I like,
anything from the states was
right.
pretty homogenous. So for a movie about the Minneapolis scene with Prince, who was not exactly like the epitome of like what American masculinity is, let alone black masculinity at that time. And for him to be like pushed to the forefront and the spotlight on him and being just this powerhouse, that had to have been like a cultural moment, a crossover moment for not just like the type of music that it was playing, but also as a black performer to a mainstream American audience. It was a watershed moment, and it should
I
not
know
be.
it's cliche to say, but he really did exist out of the realm of humanity in terms of
Oh yeah,
he's so confident
he was
and the
above,
way.
he was beyond humanity. Like this guy
No, I
was.
do believe that because even with Michael's music, there's a lot of vulnerability, as with Madonna. But Prince is never vulnerable in his music, and I think you know it's almost as if Warner Brothers came and said, "We're going to do a movie of you," and he's like, "Okay." And he was just such a natural. It's not even acting. I don't even know how to describe his performance in the film. It's not acting. It's just as if he's showing up and he's doing it. And that's not a diss. That's actually a positive. It's so organic for him. It's not. He's not trying to be an actor. He's not trying to ham it up for camera. He's not trying to learn method acting. He's not trying to learn different types of acting. He's just doing it.
Well, I think it's
And
because he
everybody
also had
can
a
film
hand.
it.
Yeah, I think it's also because he did have a hand in the script development, and it wasn't that like Warner Brothers came to him. He said to Warner Brothers like, "I'm going to make a movie, and this is how we're going to do it." So they acquiesced, and that had to have been like at the time like an unheard of thing where a musician is demanding like I want my next project is going to be a multimedia project where I'm going to do the music, I'm going to star, write, be involved in every
Pick the
facet of
cast.
this film, and he
Pick the
did.
cast.
Yeah, pick the cast. I mean, the cast is a band, his friends. Like, yeah, by the way, we're doing a movie. Like, we're going back to Minneapolis. We're going to shoot this thing. You know?
Everybody's such a great actor in that film. Even Wendy and Lisa. Even the
Yeah,
Revel. Even Morris Day and
yeah.
Jerome.
It's
Like
funny because Morris Day was supposed to take acting lessons, and apparently he got kicked out of it like within one day because he just was not taking it seriously. So it
poor
makes you
kid.
wonder, like, were they trying to like, give like Morris Day like method acting, and it's like, no, 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 I'm good. Like,
But I wouldn't even consider this like a concert film,
no, it's not.
or I would consider this as just a movie where the music doesn't play a huge part. And we'll get into the sequel of that being much more of a straight
That
musical,
is its own thing. Yeah,
and like Under the Cherry Moon is a straight musical.
yeah,
But I think Purple Rain is so beautifully done. It's very dreamy and dreamlike.
yeah.
In terms of even the poster, it's all just like it's so midnight and so neon and just dreamy. And even the shots that are done in the daytime, it just is so dreamy and dreamlike to where um it's a product of its time, but it's never been done before. And it really is catching lightning in a bottle. And I wasn't in the 80s, unfortunately. So I know that it had a huge impact because, like I said, this has never been done before. Swept the Oscars, of course. But if you watch Prince go up to the podium with Wendy and Lisa,
Mhm.
it's like he's not even surprised that
Mhm.
his film won the Oscar. It's just like, thank you. We thank you. And it was just such a cool, just too cool because he knows it was genius. And there's nothing wrong with knowing that you've done a genius, an original, and groundbreaking thing.
Yeah. I think that's where people could rightfully like assume like this man was egotistical. I hate to break it to you, but like all artists are egotistical. That is just part of how an artist is supposed to function. I think there's a lot of he is a humble person. So, but at the same time, he has to be the conductor of the image of the greater whole.
I've
And
never understood the humility aspect of artist. I mean, you can be humble, but at the same time, Prince knew he was a genius, and
yeah,
he knew, and that's okay
yeah,
to know.
and he was and it's not even like a genius like later in life. He was always a genius as a child.
Right? He was a
It just carried over, and it became bigger and better with every iteration, every album that he would do. It was always pushing boundaries, and even the movies, even though as we'll talk about Graffiti Bridge and to an extent Under the Cherry Moon, even though the movies did not connect in the way that Purple Rain did, they were still pieces of art that he made.
yes.
And as an artist, it's not his job to entertain you. He
It's
you
not his
come
job to apologize either. He never apologized for anything he did.
exactly. And there's actually a great quote that I'll bring up for Graffiti Bridge about a reevaluation of it. and it's actually very timely that we're going to talk about this. So yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so a lot of people, when we talk about Purple Rain, they focus too much on the music, which this is a musical podcast, and the music is important because if you didn't have the music, Purple Rain wouldn't have had the lasting legacy that it did. But I think, before we move into the music, I just wanted to just briefly touch upon, how important the plot is. I mean, it is a success story. It is a Cinderella story,
Yeah.
but also it's not only just the success story of the kid, but you have the Cinderella success story of Apollonia, of Morris Day, of the revolution, of the time. So it's about the kid, but I think it's more about these misfits who are trying to rise in the city to become music artists. So it's not just the kid that's trying to fight to become successful. It's Apollonia, it's Morris, it's the revolution, it's all of their stories. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, it is, pretty a star is born sort of thing. But what the things that they have to encounter, I think their enemies are each other. It's not as if there's external forces that are trying to keep them down or try to it's not the external forces that are trying to sort of push them down to where they can't succeed and get success. It's each other, but it's also their own internal struggles, which is especially true with the kid.
Well, the whole thing with the kid too, like, I mean, seeing it through the eyes in 2023, um, you could understand like what post-traumatic stress disorder is and witnessing domestic abuse and what it does to you. I'm sure in 1984, people got it, but like understanding it today, and especially the understanding of how trauma can become generational, um, it is a hard watch today because of the treatment of Apollonia, of women in general in this film. Um, Maybe like I'm getting into gender politics, but like the way that women are presented in Purple Rain, through Apollonia, through the bandmates, even Apollonia 6, it's something that like I don't think would fly today if you were to make a film like Purple Rain, and I think it's a variety of reasons for that. But it is a hard watch to see like the kid abuse Apollonia, both like physically and then also with you know darling Nikki. That it's uncomfortable, and I think it's supposed to be. It's intended to be.
Definitely.
Yeah, but like today, it is a different watch. And I think it needs to be watched like in the context that it's being presented as. You talk about like they are against each other and they have their own their inner demons basically that they have to exercise in order to find their success. And they at the end of the movie, the kid does, Apollonia does to an extent. Even Morris Day like understands like the kid better at the end of the movie than in the start of it. But there is still that rivalry of like, we need our spot at the club, and Billy's, ragging on the kid for good reason. The kid is a musical genius, but the kid is problematic. And all
His
these,
temper.
yeah, all these, well, not just like his temper, but just like just everything, like the ability that he cannot collaborate, that he writes off his bandmates, that he's late, all these things just like are constantly pushed on him. And then also bringing his father and saying like, your father was a genius, and look what happened to him, and um you kind of get those lyrics in When Doves Cry, like, maybe I'm just like my father, and that ties into the whole idea of like, again, a generational trauma of he could have been somebody and he's on his way to self-destruction. And
But unlike his father, who we don't really know what happens to him until Graffiti Bridge,
yeah.
which I think is a really excellent thing that it did. I think the kid breaks the cycle and breaks the chain.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
I think that's the most important thing. Every character has a resolution. I
yeah.
think Apple finds her resolution, not through just the kid, but through her own career. The revolution has their own resolution. Say that 8 times fast. Um, Morris Day and the Time, they find their own resolution, but the kid does as well. And I think the kid's very immature in the beginning of the movie. And
Yeah.
but I think it was so brave of Prince to show his father and to show his mother and to show the abuse and how not just like the whole victim mentality, because there was no victim mentality with that particular character, because you see how the kid is repeating traits of his
Yes.
father and how at a certain point he's like, right, I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm changed. I thought that was really because I mean that is reflective of Prince's own life. So it's like it was a very brave thing for Prince to do, and I think the plot is very deep. And it's just so many things. It's terrifying in that aspect, but it's beautiful in the other aspects. It's hilarious. I mean,
Okay.
you've got Morris Day and Jerome, who are just two hilarious geniuses. You've got the whole scene of bathing in the warm waters of Lake Minnetonka thing.
It's not really Lake Minnetonka.
I remember seeing that and I was like, okay,
They
cool.
censored when I first saw that movie, like I said on TV, they 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 blue barred, and it was just like so awkward. It's like
This
as
me
a
as
kid,
a
like watching this, I'm like, ooh, whoa, and oh, wow. It was just so
I
weird.
I remember as a little kid having the DVD on my portable DVD player. And every time that in the back of my parents' car, and every time that scene would come on, I would have to fast forward because I didn't want I mean, to be watching Apollonia
Yeah.
skate up in the lake. But it's hilarious. And I don't think it's one dimensional film. I think there's so many things. The plot's really important. But so I mean when you talk about the music in the film, it's sort of hard to talk about Purple Rain because not because of the plot and not because of the legacy. It's so hard to talk about this film because of, like I said, how the soundtrack and the songs took on a life of their own and they eclipsed the film. So when you talk about the Purple Rain album, you're going to bring up so many songs that are, of course, genius compositions. But I think in terms of consistency, but also in terms to give the film justice, it's important to talk about the film's place. I mean, the music's place within the film
Yeah.
versus just the album of Purple Rain. So I think the music in the film fits extremely well in terms of um, moving the plot along, but also I think the music in the film is reflective of what's going on. There's a couple of filler songs like Computer Blue, which
Yeah.
I've never gravitated towards Computer Blue.
Yeah,
But
it's one of those. This we're just putting it in. It has no bearing.
but of course the film opens with the brilliant, 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 brilliant opening scene and the brilliant, brilliant opening song "Let's Go Crazy."
It just
And I
sets.
remember I do. I remember being so excited growing up watching. You can see his motorcycle and you can see everybody getting into the club and the way that it's shot. And it was just incredible. And every song after that just it's such an original song that all the songs in the film are so original and so groundbreaking that they could have easily been split apart and put on different Prince's albums. But them together, it's like you have to have every single one of those songs, the beautiful ones, Darling Nikki, all of them have to be together because it really moves the plot of the film.
Yeah.
And of course, there are lots of people who love Purple Rain, the album, and love the songs from Purple Rain, separately, like When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy and Purple Rain, of course, who have never seen the film.
That's a wild thing to think about. I mean, um I'm surprised that there is that almost like break between the, you love the album but you never even seen the movie. I think they're just intrinsically entwined.
To us, yeah, and to Prince fans, I of course, but I remember being in Georgia. Let's Go Crazy would come on the radio how many times
Yeah.
on the pop rock radio, and then hit number When Doves Cry hit number one. People started equating it to Prince and the Purple Rain tour, and I think there are people who tie it to the movie. There, of course, are a lot of Prince aficionados, but it says a lot about that album and how brilliantly done it is that it took a life on its own,
Yeah.
separate from the movie that it came from, which I think Prince didn't necessarily have any qualms about, and he was still smashing records with the album.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it is. They both stand on their own laurels. Together, like you have essentially like a media package. You could love the album, you may not even know about the movie, or you may not even like the movie. As crazy as that may even be. Um, but I don't think one necessarily overshadows the other. I mean, as long as there's an anniversary, there's going to be a reissue of either the film or the album or both. Um, and we know that the Prince estate is always going to be churning these things out,
But you know,
whenever the opportunity comes.
I'm a Prince fan that is not necessarily against the estate doing what they're doing, because at least they are keeping him alive,
Yeah.
unlike Michael Jackson's estate that are so stingy and that you never get anything new with Michael Jackson's estate.
Yeah.
So Purple Rain, of course, the music in the film is brilliant. From the beginning of the opening song to every performance, even with Time, even with Morris Day and the Time, their song Jungle Love, Apollonia's Sex Shooter,
Mhm.
the beautiful duet between Prince and Apollonia, Take Me With You, which is one of my favorite songs in the film. And the way that it's shot with them on the motorcycle is gorgeous.
Yes.
And um, so knowing what we know about the soundtrack and the music and how important it is to the plot of the film and how it took on a life of its own, um, do you see this as a straight musical, or what kind of musical would you classify and define this musical as?
Hmm. It is a musical. It is a musical. It is not a like a concert film or anything like that. The music functions both organically with Prince and the kid in the Revolution playing the music at the clubs, but also in the montage sequences and all that. It's similar to like a Star is Born,
Or Dick
where or Dick Tracy, yeah. So it is a musical, and I believe it has been classified as a musical. Um, it is a it is its own thing in many regards, but yeah, I
Incredible.
would say it's definitely like it is
It's
that.
a drama. It's a musical. It's a concert film. It's all those things together.
Yeah.
It exists like everything Prince has ever done. It exists outside the realm of being put in a box.
Yes, no, that's the perfect way to describe it, especially like, how Prince was. That it is this combination of all these elements that, this is what I'm going to make. This is my art. This is the film that I want made. And his director, Albert Magnoli, I think his name was, who wasn't really a director. He was an editor, and he just, was basically hired, because the original director didn't want to do it, and he I think was a journeyman director. So Prince, probably was directing it behind the scenes. He just couldn't get the credit at the time. So
I,
all these things were there to basically become the film.
and
So
I hate even like shortchange the soundtrack, because it's unlike other movies to where we talk about cult musicals, to where there's always a song or two that you could do without, or there's a song that could be added, or there's a song that we love more than others.
yeah,
But with this particular soundtrack, it's so genius and groundbreaking, and it's so iconic that it's almost sacrilegious to pick apart the soundtrack of Purple Rain, in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, every song is its own incredibly like made composed piece of the story, regardless whether or not you're watching the movie, but like just listening to the album, you are transported into this world that Prince is bringing you into, and each song has its own through line.
And
So
they're all recorded live.
yeah, I mean, again, the we keep calling him a genius, and he is. It's almost becoming like tiresome to keep saying it, but like,
Well, the only song that wasn't recorded live, of course, was "Take Me With You,"
yeah,
but because it's pre-recorded, of course, with the Apollonia and Lisa and Wendy and Prince. I think they from my understanding from research from years ago, they Apollonia's voice was blended with Lisa and Wendy, which is
Oh,
okay. Because you can hear multiple women singing at one time, but it's all right.
yeah.
But just the soundtrack and the film, like the sound, a lot of musicals, when you listen to the soundtrack version, they're different than the musical sequences that take place in the film.
Yeah.
Where Purple Rain soundtrack, their songs are exactly like they appear in the film because they were recorded live.
Mhm.
You can hear people in the background, like, you know, clapping or, hooting and hollering. And it's like, it's such a genius move and also sort of a risky move to record your soundtrack live.
Yeah, I think it gave an immersive feel to it that for the listener, to be a participant by hearing the song, but hearing like the nature around it, like the organic feel of the track and feeling as though like you were there. That's brilliant. That makes it, it doesn't seem like a studio musical. It makes it seem like you are there, at the club and you're watching the kid or you're watching the time. Like it's something that had to have been thought out. Like this is how it's going to sound in order for it to work. I
I
mean,
don't,
there's not one part of this movie that doesn't feel like attention to detail was prioritized to make sure that like everything, from the most minute detail of a costume to the sound, it had to have been thought out and planned out in a way that just makes it feel like the way it's supposed to feel when you watch the movie.
and I don't know any other artist that would be that brave in that time period, even now, to record a soundtrack live.
Oh yeah, I mean today, like I mean the biggest movie in the world right now is the Taylor Swift concert film. And I'm pretty sure they probably did some sort of like, combination of like both live and studio recording and all that. Not
Of
I'm
course,
not trying to diss like Taylor Swift and all that. I'm but like I don't
you
see
can't.
someone like
You
Taylor Swift making like a Purple Rain. Like that's that's
count
not
it.
gonna happen. That would be
Well,
cool.
Prince has never lip sync. I mean, he always was very adamant about if I can't sing live, I'm just not going to sing.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack, it's just so beautiful, and it had such a profound impact on me my entire life, to where ever since I was 11 or 12, that the movie has always been such an important part of my life, and that soundtrack has been such an important part of my life. And Purple Rain has always been that song has always been such a huge part of my life. And
It's my favorite. It's
since
my
I
favorite song of the entire album of the movie Purple Rain. It's just this. It is my go-to karaoke song when I want to close the night. Just everything about it. I mean, even the name Purple Rain,
Purple Rain,
and it. I mean, like my background right now. Like it's
yeah,
just something about it that maybe it's like a psychological thing, but like it brings like a tranquility and it brings like a feeling
it's
of
just
the
like a
night.
4D experience.
So
It's a 4D
so
experience.
yeah, no, it is. It's like you could it like you could feel texture just by like saying the name Purple Rain, you know?
And I'm wondering, Prince, of course, is purple, but the purple one. But I'm wondering, just he had such a beautiful way with words, and the way that he named songs, Computer Blue, the beautiful ones, Darling Nikki, I mean, Purple Rain, When Doves Cry. He was so poetic.
Yeah.
And
I love
um,
his use of using numbers also to like to replace words.
no,
Like it does
there's two,
yeah, like I mean it just feels
Raven to the Joy
yeah,
Fantastic.
it just you would almost think it's like childlike. And I think it's tapping into like a part of psyche that maybe like had that childhood because it seems like he did not have a happy childhood, you know, and maybe and similar to Michael Jackson, but like
And
utilizing those aspects of your childhood and putting it into your musical genius as an adult in the way that like even just the spelling of your lyrics of your poetry really it's unheard of.
all
It
of
was unheard of at the time.
all of his songs, even his over sexual songs, Cream, And, Velvet Pussy, Darling Nikki, all of his songs that are even sexual are still poetic because
Yeah.
the way that he plays with plays with his lyrics and plays with his own music. It's when you listen to a Prince song, you never have to wonder how many artists wrote or worked on that one particular song because it's all composed,
Mhm.
conducted, constructed by Prince. That's it. That's it. And it's just amazing. And like I thought about it, when you say the word Purple Rain, it's just something that washes over you. I know that sounds so cliche and so cheesy, but even the name Purple Rain, it's like it's sort of dangerous because you think of like acid, but also it's something sort of therapeutic and something sort of somber about the
Yeah.
rain and purple.
Yeah.
And I think people don't really get it sometimes. And I think because Prince became such a big star, like you said, people started focusing on his androgyny and started focusing on which women he was dating or focused on his, dispute with Warner Brothers of why he changed his name to the love symbol.
Yeah.
He was everything he did, none of it. He was a showman, but I think unlike other artists, and this is related to this film, he didn't do things just for the show, for media attention. He did things because it was important to him. That's what was happening internally, and it just happened to make headlines.
Yeah. And
And
I
I think,
mean, some of it probably was intentional,
oh, of course,
to remain in the public eye. Um, and similar to like its contemporaries. Of course, like who's, so and so dating now? Or are they making a new album? Oh my God. Or do they have a drug problem? Or did they find God? Like, it just was how it was in the 90s, when when we got to Graffiti Bridge. And I think there's a lot of that actually kind of translated into what Graffiti Bridge eventually became in terms of the film and even as an album.
well, the legacy of this film, of course, it was constantly played on VH1. We're talking about
Yes.
pre Prince demise.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after I got it on VHS and then DVD, I remember seeing it on VH1, Sundance, Showtime, um, I forgot the name of that channel, but it was completely devoted to rock music and rock movies. Don't remember the name of it. But they used to play Purple Rain under Movies That Rock on VH1.
Yeah,
If you remember
I
that.
I was an internet VH1, and there was a giant Purple Rain poster signed by him in the
What?
yeah.
Oh my God. You probably look at VH1 nowadays and you're like, what the hell happened?
Oh, I have no I I was there excuse me, like mid 2000s. So like it was like right around the time when they started going into like reality TV. This is getting off topic, but like, and I saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, oh, we're going there. Like this is no longer going to be a music
Music.
channel.
VH1 behind the music. That was
Ah,
so.
I love those.
So I'm coming from Purple Rain to where like in Prince to where like I discovered him at 11 or rediscovered him slash discovered him at 11 or 12. So I don't know what the legacy was because I was discovering it. My family wasn't into Prince.
Yeah.
My Nobody in my family, nobody in my contemporaries, none of my friends were into Prince. It was just something that I just gravitated towards him. So I didn't know I was going into Purple Rain and Prince as a young child, and to me it was brand new.
Mhm.
So do you remember before we move on to other things? Do you remember the impact and the legacy of this film once it hit and sort of got in the public consciousness?
When it became into public consciousness, a little before my time. I mean, I was born in '85, so a year after the movie came out. But I mean, I remember Prince with the Batman soundtrack, and that already there was like huge. And I mean, it was like one of the first times as a kid that like I kind of understood like what like media was. Um, especially with like a superhero and all that. So to see like Bat Dance and it being as big as it was, and then Prince in the '90s when he had the new Power Generation and then the Love Symbol and then everything else that was kind of going on with him, where I guess like I said like earlier, like where he almost became like not like parody, but like the way the media treated him at that time was not exactly like kind. And with he was no longer really like in terms of like what music was in the 90s. And that's actually a question that I have for you. Like, I mean, for you just to discover 80s Prince at the time that you were growing up had to have been like, again, like, why are you listening to oldies? You
I
know?
don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. I
No,
don't know.
and it's not a bad thing because, like, I mean, when I was a teenager in the early 2000s, I really didn't like the music that was coming out of like the scene of like
No,
new
I never.
metal, that stuff. And I
I never
listened to
like.
a lot of older stuff. I listened to Prince. I listened to the B-52s. I listened to television. Like I got into like really weird stuff because I was just not into what was coming out at the time that was designed for people my age. So to
I
look
think.
back, like, yeah, it probably the
I
best
think
thing.
up very sheltered in terms of this is, believe it or not, pre-internet. So I had nothing to have a preconceived idea or notion about an artist.
Yeah.
Um, Not to get off topic because this is relevant, but like 5 years old, I was like, I woke up one day, I was like, I love Dolly Parton. I'm gonna go get Dolly Parton CDs. Michael Jackson, You Are Not Alone. The History album came out. I was like, I love Michael Jackson. I was like 5.
Yeah.
Prince, it was just 9 or 10. I was like, I like Prince now. And it wasn't, nobody had introduced me to Prince.
Mhm.
Nobody had introduced me to Dolly or Michael Jackson. It was something that these people I just discovered myself. Madonna is a very close fourth, and then my Boy George is a fifth. And
Mhm.
they were all important to me at different times in my life. But it was just something to me. So I had no preconceived ideas about who they were or who they were then or who they were now.
Yeah.
I was discovering them. And there used to be a store called CD Warehouse to
Mhm.
where people you could go sell your CDs and they would have the buffer and they like would get all the scratches off the CD. I don't
Mhm.
know if this is a Midwest or a Southern thing because I'm from the South, but like they had, I would go and get a Prince CD and a Michael Jackson CD and a Dolly Parton CD. And so I was discovering different versions of them at the same time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the same time I listened to Purple Rain, I was listening to Raven to the Joy Fantastic, the Gold album, the CD single, Most Beautiful Girl in the World.
Mhm.
So I didn't see them as separate decades or second separate versions. I was still naive and I was absorbing it all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I didn't see them as separate or distinct decades or periods of their life. I don't know. It was just
You're just
I just
going in and just learning about the artist and just
yeah,
listening. Yeah, I
but
mean
not even through
that's the
the
way to
internet.
do it.
Not even through the internet, just through liner notes
Yeah.
and through liner notes and just through magazines. It wasn't even through the internet. It was just getting more and more absorbed into. I mean, the reason I found out Prince was a vegan because in Raven to the Joy Fantastic, he said something about the wool and meat industry.
Mhm.
So it's just, but it had a huge, profound impact on me, and it's like, um, his androgyny, of course, really impacted me as well because it was something very mysterious and it was actually something very groundbreaking. And he did it, of course. Michael Jackson did it to an extent with the androgyny. I think Michael's was more internal.
It leaned
Um,
a little bit more. It leaned a little bit more masculine, but
right. I
especially
don't
with
think,
Prince, though, like he
uh,
that was leaning completely
right.
into it.
And I don't think Michael went as far as he wanted to go.
Yeah.
Um, Boy George was, of course, androgynous, but Prince's androgyny. I've always gravitated towards androgynous people. Prince's androgyny was something. It was something that he just didn't. He was so confident, and I wish that. But there's a difference, and we'll get into the legacy, and we'll move on to the sequel. But there's a difference between being confident that a lot of artists nowadays, and they have no substance, and they have nothing to back it up.
Mhm.
Prince was confident because he was a musical genius. And I love Madonna and I love Michael Jackson. But I think Prince's genius transcended their genius
Yeah.
to a level of playing instruments, writing, composing. I mean, how many? I was watching an interview with Apollonia today talking about how the Prince estate discovered. I'm talking about tens of thousands of unreleased songs.
Oh yeah. There was like I believe like around the time when he passed that the news was already coming out that like even though he's gone, there will be a Prince album released
The next 50
every
years.
year, pretty much depending on how the estate is because there's just so much content.
And
Um,
like you said, he might have been like, he might have left because the media is terrible. Media is terrible. And I've never been one to listen to the media's perception of an artist. Because we're not sheep. But
mhm.
even though he kind of fell off the public consciousness, he never stopped writing.
No, he kept working like just
And he
because
owned, yeah,
yeah, just because like uh things change, um music tastes change.
people
That does not
change.
mean the artist stopped. Exactly, people change. That does not mean the artist stopped. And especially for him, I mean, he did find some like great collaborations, not just like in the 90s, but even in the early 2000s that like, Prince is still around and Prince could still pack a house. Like you do not want to write off Prince. And lo and behold, like, he kept performing until his dying day.
And I'm just now, after doing some research and rewatching Purple Rain and Graffiti Bridge, I'm like having a refound and reclaimed appreciation for him. Because, like I said, when he passed away, like there was a couple years that I couldn't listen to him. It's weird because it's like your childhood hero dies, and so it's like, and
Oh,
very
I completely understand. Like, I mean, for me, when Bowie passed,
mhm.
I've only listened to Black Star maybe 3 times.
It's very
I cannot go through that album, like not without like having to take a pause and be like, all right, I have to walk away. It's probably one of the most esoteric pieces of like modern music I've ever heard. And I suggest
also
to anybody,
very oh, what's
yeah,
the word I'm looking for? It's a premonition
it's a
and
premonition.
con-
He knew he was dying.
conscious premonition.
Yeah. But there's a lot of like throwback also, and not to again detract to Bowie,
Right.
but there's a lot of like throwback to his Thin White Duke era, station era, where he was really into like some, I don't want to say like a cult, but like it was Kabbalistic kind of things.
Yeah.
And the way that the album is structured, the way that the songs are written, it's very in that wheelhouse of like it's a spiritual kind of experience to like listen through Black Star all the way through and understand like these are the last songs of a dying man. Um, it's heavy stuff, so I don't want
I,
to deter
yeah,
anyone.
I think what happened with Prince is, though, and I'll move into this, is that with other artists that I really loved, I expected it. Like I knew Michael Jackson had really bad people around him.
Yeah.
But with Prince, it was just so shocking to me that I didn't know how to deal with it.
And I
And so,
remember like I think like a couple days before he passed that like there something happened to him and they had to like say like, oh, he's fine, he's okay, and everyone's like okay, like
yeah, Atlanta, where I'm from.
yeah, something happened where like he got hurt or something like that.
So the
Um,
legacy of Purple Rain's never left public consciousness. It's a groundbreaking film. It's been re-released. It's never left. But I think to me it's changed in terms of how much it meant to me that I have a newfound appreciation for the genius. And I've always loved Prince, of course, but now I have a newfound appreciation for the cinematography, for the writing, for the live soundtrack. I have a newfound appreciation for it and a new love for it. And I'm after doing research on this episode, and that sounds so weepy, like I'm on Dr. Phil, but like I'm able to like go back and listen to more Prince songs now. And I'm like, okay, let me listen to his song Another Lonely Christmas. Like
yeah,
I'm able to kind of like revisit him in terms of being able to feel comfortable listening to him again. Not because I was mad, but it's kind of like there is an anger that you have that your childhood hero is gone, under
yeah,
circumstances.
yeah, totally. I mean, especially the circumstances, like it was one of those. Why did it happen? Like in that year too, I think like it was 2016, 2017 when he passed. And that was a bad year for like any
April April 2016.
16, yeah. And like that year was just like people were just dropping. And I think like Tom Petty also passed that year, and again, it was like a fentanyl overdose, and it's just like, oh my god, like what's going on? Like it just was sudden, and I think the best word is unfair.
Unfair.
It's unfair
Yeah.
that we're living in a post Prince world.
Well, so one second, sorry. I'm trying to get my so but my love of Prince continued, of course, when I saw Under the Cherry Moon. And I discovered Under the Cherry Moon. I discovered Under the Cherry Moon accidentally at
Mhm.
Walmart because it came on VHS at Walmart. And I never forget. And I knew from reading online forums, Prince was one of the first artists to have an online forum before anybody did.
I
And I
remember
knew,
this, and I know this because I not to get you up. I know this because of a Simpsons joke.
oh, I don't know about that.
There's an episode of The Simpsons where it's there there's a movie that's going to be shot in Springfield, a Radioactive Man movie, and Bart's at the comic shop, and Bart overhears the comic book guy saying, "Oh, they're going to have a film of Radioactive Man," and Bart's like, "Oh my god, who's going to play Radioactive Man? Hold on, I'll find out." And the comic book guy goes to this computer and goes on the message board saying, "Who is Radioactive Man?" And they start going to a montage of like different people on their computers, and then it turns into like a almost like a Brady Bunch kind of like image on image, and in the center is Prince like on the computer, like on the message board. It's just like
I remember
this is
being at
random, like
well, that's how I discovered Under the Cherry Moon because I was at Christian school
mm,
when other kids were on MySpace. This is when the internet was kind of thing, and I was on the Prince fan board. And I
mm.
remember you could copy the love symbol and use it. And I remember I thought it was so cool. They had it in my MySpace profile. But I heard there was a sequel to um Purple Rain. Well, at Walmart, of course, I saw Under the Cherry Moon, the beautiful purple cover with Prince, and you've got I don't know her name. I forgot her name. That actress in the left-hand corner. You've got Jerome in the right-hand corner with his phone, and you've got all this beautiful. So I was like, oh, maybe this is the sequel to Purple Rain.
Mhm.
So I actually saw Under the Cherry Moon first. Wasn't really impressed because of my mind, my 12-year-old mind. I didn't like black and white, but
Yeah,
now I know how genius that was and how beautiful it was. And come to find out, Prince wrote and directed it.
yeah. And that
And
was also like that was a complete like again the 180 from like going from like Purple Rain to Under the Cherry Moon, and
it was
like
brilliant.
giving yeah no it is it's an underappreciated film. um its corresponding album I believe is like it's well regarded, but as a film like it's again one of those like it did not
Yes.
connect. And I think it probably was what you just said, a black and white movie being made in the 80s, and I think the tastes at that time were not there.
No.
And that's kind of like probably to its detriment that it's a period piece. Also, it's taking place in like exotic locations. It's
Right.
its
And
own
an
thing.
undetermined time period. You really don't know when it. But the thing is
Yeah,
this, and
it's very like anachronistic. Like you think it's like the 20s, but then it's not. Like it's weird. You
but
know.
also another example of a Prince song transcending the film. Kiss is one of his biggest hits, and it's from that movie. It's performed
Yeah.
in there. His song Mountains is from that particular movie. But so I wasn't really impressed with Under the Cherry Moon. I think I only saw it like once or twice when I was young, and I wasn't. And then when I was 14, I met a friend in middle school who also was obsessed with Prince, and he introduced me to Graffiti Bridge. He's like, "This is the sequel to Purple Rain," and I remember renting it from Blockbuster on DVD because I think it was unavailable on VHS for a while, and it was released on a bare bones DVD
Mhm.
around the same time Purple Rain. Do you remember DVD covers used to be almost paper, and you opened it and it had the things the chapters on the
Yep.
left hand
I
side?
remember it's like their like version of liner notes where you would have the chapter markers and all that. And I remember also like the bare bone DVD where it's like the biggest thing you would get is maybe a trailer.
Trailer.
It was like the biggest thing, like, oh my God, it comes with extra items, or additional content. No, it's the trailer.
So that was my introduction to Graffiti Bridge, and I did not understand it. And then I tried to watch it again at 23 and still didn't understand it. But then we watched it recently and had a brand new appreciation and understanding. But before we get into that, how were you introduced to the Graffiti Bridge?
So I was aware of like the album. I had no idea that there was a movie, let alone it being an actual sequel to Purple Rain. I'm pretty sure I had a conversation with you and you told me about like, no, Graffiti Bridge is actually the sequel. And that blew my mind. So I just recently saw it. I saw it last week. I've watched it 3 times now. So I think that kind of helps in terms of how I could process it and I do have an appreciation for it. I do not think it's a good movie, but it is certainly something. The best way that I could describe it is as somebody that does Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm like with my cast and all that continuously. It is similar to the way that like we view Shock Treatment, in that it is a complete 180 from what you remember from the original film. It is its own thing. It is, technically a sequel. You could also just compare it as an equal or a companion piece.
Mhm.
And it's for a variety of reasons, mainly the way that the movie is shot, the way that the song composition in the film is compared to its predecessor. But yeah, like I was surprised at the lack of even just physical media for Graffiti Bridge. I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know if that's because the estate kind of sees it as like not something really worth pushing out as a film. That there's more of an appreciation for it from fans of the music than a casual movie viewer. I'm surprised that like it's not actually put in maybe like some sort of like double feature 2-pack of a Blu-ray of Purple Rain and Graffiti Bridge. It's something that I'm very surprised that Warner Brothers.
It is.
Oh, it is. I've never.
Yes. It prints Purple Rain, Under the Cherry Moon, and Graffiti Bridge are in this beautiful package. And
They did
under
make
the
it.
prints as Christopher and Under the Cherry Moon is the image on the front cover.
Oh,
So, and it's a beautiful purple velvet
okay.
set. But Helena, who's going to be on the episode later, actually, this is her first time seeing Graffiti Bridge, and she's actually said she's watched it 3 times as well recently, and she's upset.
I think
And she's upset.
Yeah, I think you have to watch it at least 3 times. Like basically for me, it was I watched it just all the way through without any kind of context. I watched it again to take notes, and then I watched it one more time just to see like whether or not this is something that like I feel like has legs stand on, that I could be like, oh yeah, no, this is really good. I do have some conflicting opinions about it, but it exists. It's going to exist long after I'm gone. So
In terms of, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about my brain. There's some times where it's just a natural thing. I prefer sequels sometimes. You're talking to someone, I know you're the Rocky Horror King. I prefer Shock Treatment to Rocky Horror.
Oh, I do
and
too.
it started off that way.
I do too. Don't worry about that.
It didn't start off that way because Rocky Horror was my big thing. And then I was like, I discovered through Blockbuster Video, the Rocky Horror Picture Show special edition DVD, that Richard O'Brien wrote the follow-up. I'm like, the follow-up. Mm-hmm. And then I prefer Grease too.
I love Grease too.
I don't like Grease at all. I find Grease.
We were just watching, my wife and I were just watching Grease 2 Friday night, and already we were just singing along and doing the dialogue and being like, when are we ever going to do this as a Shadowcast? Because this is so much fun.
But in terms of Graffiti Bridge, it took me a few times to appreciate this, and it's just shocking. Mm-hmm. I prefer the music of Purple Rain, but I prefer the plot of Graffiti Bridge.
Really? That's interesting.
Because of how mystical And there's different reasons that like Purple Rain will you can never eclipse Purple Rain. Graffiti will Bridge will never eclipse Purple Rain. But I think Purple Rain was done as a one-off movie, and it was done, all the eggs were thrown into that basket.
Mhm.
Everything that you can think of in terms of budget, in terms of soundtrack, were put into this movie. But
Mhm.
Graffiti Bridge was completely written, directed, produced, composed by Prince.
Yeah.
And so, and the reason that I love the music of Purple Rain more than Graffiti Bridge, and Purple Rain means a lot to me, but Graffiti Bridge is a straight musical
Mhm.
in terms of musical sequences, as in that weird. So the music that exists in Graffiti Bridge, some of it is where the characters are conscious of the music that's happening,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is where it takes. I don't know the name of it. John, or one of our
Oh,
recurring,
that the terminology for like when the music is being
right?
utilized. Or
That
yeah, I
I
forgot the term.
forgot the name of it, but it's a combination of both. It's a classic straight Hollywood musical in terms of, like, for instance, the beautiful scene on the balcony when Prince sings Thieves in the Temple.
Yeah.
That is in the choreography. And then, I mean, I've done research on Graffiti Bridge because I tried to make sense. Prince gets a lot of flack in terms of Graffiti Bridge. People are like, what was he thinking? How weird, how occult, and how Seventh Day Advent. Because this is when he was really
Oh
big in
no,
the Seventh.
it's very much like on the screen. Like this is his advertisement for that church.
The Seventh Day Adventist. This is
Yeah.
pre.
Yeah.
But actually doing research about this movie, people, Graffiti Bridge is considered like the bastard child of the Prince fandom. But if you actually do a little bit of research on Graffiti Bridge, you're like, oh, so I didn't know. I know Prince dated everybody under the moon,
Mhm.
including Kim Basinger.
Yes.
Find out Kim Basinger was the one that created the story for Graffiti Bridge,
Mhm.
and about angels, and when Prince and she was originally supposed to be Ara,
Yes.
and when Prince and Kim Basinger broke up, he had to rewrite and change the story, but he wanted it to be very spiritual. But apparently, it was started out as a time movie.
Yeah, it
As
was supposed to be for Morris Day because they were reforming. And I think there was even like some contention that like Morris Day was upset that like the movie was sort of pulled under him. But it was not intended to be a sequel to Purple Rain. I believe it was its own thing. And then because of the failure of Under the Cherry Moon financially for Warner Brothers, if they were to do another movie, it's got to be a sequel. And you got to bring back the kid. You got to bring back the time. Like this was his way of doing it. I think to get the movie made, to get the fundraising for it.
And it's well known in the Prince fandom that Madonna turned down not only Under the Cherry Moon, but she also turned down Graffiti Bridge.
Mhm.
So I think that's why they had a frenemy friendship for a while, because she turned down both of those roles.
Yeah.
But something there is such genius that went in, sometimes even more genius that went into Graffiti Bridge than
Mhm.
Purple Rain. I mean, you've got so many cult musical connections. You've got so many connections with R&B and pop and hip hop and
Oh yeah.
rock. Since Ingrid Chavez, who is Aura, she wrote "Justify My Love," Madonna,
Yeah.
with Madonna and what's his name that was married to, I can't, my mind's blanking, married to Lisa Bonet,
Oh,
American Woman.
Lenny Kravitz.
Lenny Kravitz. Yeah, he wrote Justify My Love. She wrote Justify My Love with Lenny Kravitz and Madonna.
Yeah.
She's an established poet and established songwriter. And then you've got Rosie Gaines in the movie. You've got Mavis Staples.
David
You've got,
Staples, George Clinton.
oh my God,
I
George
think even
Clinton,
Paul Abdul was involved at one point, being a choreographer.
probably. And then Tevin Campbell.
Evan Campbell, like the movie was like definitely the launching pad for like Prince in the '90s in every respect, especially with Paisley Park. Like the way that this project not only just like as a film but also as an album. Um, it's interesting that like this was sort of like a combination. It's almost like a quilt of content to make the music of Graffiti Bridge, because a lot of the music
Everybody,
from Graffiti
the
Bridge What's that?
Everybody's having a good time.
Yeah, everyone has their moment in this film. I think more so than in Purple Rain in terms of like the music, and I think that's kind of a reason why it does kind of has a bad rap with moviegoers. I mean, for an audiophile, it's a journey with different music and different types of music. But for a cinephile to watch a musical, it might be harder to understand like the through line with such different types of music and musical genre, and especially at this time,
Well,
early like 1990, not even the early 90s, it's 1990. So it's like this weird period of like transition from the 80s and the 80s sound of Prince into the 90s with the new power generation, with the time back, with Tevin Campbell, and then you got like George Clinton, and you got Mavis Staples. It's like this weird, just like everybody, yeah, everyone's got a song, everyone's doing something. Um,
well, the thing is,
it's just it's wild. It's just wild.
George Clinton's George Clinton's scene. Watched that last night. I just giggled. He's just there. He's just
Yeah, it's just
there.
happening. Like, it's just
I was waiting for Rick James to pop out of
oh
some.
god.
But what I was gonna say is the reason I think I'm weird. I like movies that are confined to spaces. Again, I'm weirdo.
Hmm.
So one of my favorite subgenres of musicals are musicals that are confined to like Shock Treatment is confined to a place.
Yeah.
Streets of Fire, Dick Tracy, Little Shop of Horrors are all filmed inside.
Yeah.
And Bugsy Malone is all filmed inside. So it looks like it's a noir, another world.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about Graffiti Bridge is that it was all filmed in Prince's house.
It's it is jarring though. Like that, like when I first saw it, the first thing that like I wrote in my notes was this is a music video. And it is like the way that the the entire film is shot, as a musical. It's a completely different atmosphere compared to Purple Rain, and probably intended to be that. But like it's almost as though like Prince basically got all the sets from Batman '89, had them brought over to Minneapolis to Paisley Park, and set up Gotham City as like the set for this
I
film.
never thought.
Well, I felt as though like there was so much of like the Batman album that kind of like found its way into this movie and technically the soundtrack too. Even though the soundtrack is made up of like a lot of music that was not released between like 81 to like 88, but it works. But like the way that the kid is presented in this movie compared to how the kid was in Purple Rain, I get a very Batman feel from like Prince in the way that he's interpreting the kid 6 years removed from Purple Rain. And Morris Day is basically the Joker in this movie. Like Morris Day is like a cartoon character compared to how Morris Day was presented in Purple Rain. And I think it fits within the world of Graffiti Bridge is this heightened reality. It is unapologetically bold and just really laying it thick with the type of story that it is, especially with like aura as a presence in this film. And I mean, Ingrid Chavez, beautiful woman, does what she can with the role. It's not exactly a deep role. She's more of a plot device than a character, but it serves the purpose of the narrative. It really is like this. You don't want to call it like a spectacular failure. Like to call it a failure, I think is like really like doing it a disservice to what it was.
What I found interesting is that I feel like the characters are more, you have more time to flesh them out in this. And, I'm sure you have the same view that the Brad and Janet in Shock Treatment, or some people view the Brad and Janet in Shock Treatment as a different Brad and Janet than in
Yeah.
Rocky Horror. Some people theorize that Brad and Janet in Denton, Ohio is the different Brad and Janet in Denton, Texas.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
consider
the theory.
I same I consider them the same Brad and Janet because I'm like, oh my God, look how far they've come. And I
Yeah,
consider the kid in Morris Day the same kid in Morris Day because it's like, and there's a really harrowing, really heart wrenching connection to Purple Rain when he's talking to Aura or he's talking to one of his other girlfriends. He says, oh, and he's talking to Aura. The kid says, um, I still, it's kind of stupid, but I still write letters to my father.
yeah, yeah. And that's the
So we
connection
learn,
there, that it's a follow up, and that his father has passed, and that
yeah.
he's
And Morris Day says that really douchebag thing about your mother's in a mental institution.
yeah, yeah.
And another thing that I didn't think about until I read trivia, Morris Day and Morris and the kid never interact in Purple Rain. They're never in the same room. They never talk.
That is
They have
true.
no dialogue. So
Yeah,
in Purple Rain, I mean, in Graffiti Bridge, they actually connect with one another. They actually have screen time with one another.
yeah.
They actually talk to one another. They actually acknowledge one another. So like, I don't know. I love the camaraderie and I love the way that the kid and Morris Day act in Graffiti Bridge. I'm
There's
sorry, another
definitely that
weird
hero villain rivalry that
complex.
it is. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It really is that, like, I didn't even really register what you just said about, like, they never really have like a scene together in Purple Rain, yet now in Graffiti Bridge they are sharing screen time, and they are very much,
Well, Chris tore this film apart as being a vanity project for Prince, and that he was trying to sell himself as some messiah figure, or that he was trying to push
yeah,
the Seven
I don't
Adventist movement.
buy that. I don't buy that at all. I think it was the case of it being that he wanted to just do another project, and the only way to get this project made was to make it a sequel to Purple Rain. That he was handling an album to tie into the film, using music that had not been released. So it's not like, I mean, even though there was original composition and collaboration, sonically it's not like the most cohesive album, but it's good. It's really good. And it's kind of like a taste of like what's to come with Prince in the 90s, especially with New Power Generation.
Oh God,
Um,
yeah,
so,
pearls.
yeah. So like you're getting like the tastes of different flavors of what music is going to be for the decade to come. It really falls in this weird period. Again, like, even though the movie was released in like 90, I'm pretty sure that it was like made in like 89. So like you are at the tail end of the 80s. Um, Prince is, changing the sound. He even changed his image. Like, his image in this movie is based off of what he was looking like during the Batman era. When he straightened his hair, and the androgyny is kind of lessened, or it's less flamboyant, buoyant. But there is a change in the look. There is a change in the sound. He is picking up on trends. Hip hop is now becoming like a much larger music genre. You were bringing classic, blues into it. You're bringing in young talent with Evan Campbell. Like, you're trying to basically set the scene for, I think, like almost like what will eventually be his career for like the next decade. And this movie is going to be the platform for it.
So Apollonia, of course, is supposed to be in this movie, but she turned it down because of pay. Because
Mhm.
Prince was like, I am, because I watched the interview with Apollonia. She still can't talk about Prince because of how upset she is about that. Prince, their relationship was completely platonic. But
Mhm.
she's like, we can't. He's like, we're doing a sequel to Purple Rain. Be there or be square, basically. He's like, we can't pay you a lot. She's like, well, I have a manager now. I want this much money. I want a producer credit. He's like, I can't do it. I'm funding this myself. So even though Prince was mad at her for not doing the movie, she warned him, do not invest your own money into a movie. Never invest your own movie into, and he didn't really get it. He's like, oh, this is the Wizard of Oz. He kept comparing it to the Wizard of
Yeah.
Oz, I guess because of the spiritual awakening that he was having. But I wonder why he invested his own money. I think it's because he was this was the decline of his relationship with Warner Brothers. I don't think he trusted them.
No, no. In fact, like I think the budget for the movie was only like maybe between four
7 million.
to 7 million. Yeah, so it's pretty low for a movie of like the type that it's supposed to be. And yeah, like I could definitely see like the deterioration with Warner Brothers, with Prince and Paisley Park, that it was no longer a kind of relationship that I think like Warner Brothers was seeing the money on, which is crazy to think about because the year before that he did Batman, and that was
Which
like
broke.
the biggest movie in the world and the biggest soundtrack in the world. But I
I
think
don't
for
think he
him to
wanted to.
keep, I'm sorry.
I don't know if he technically wanted to do Batman. I think he saw it as really commercial, and it was supposed to be, of course, a collaboration between Michael Jackson and.
But I mean, I think he did end up enjoying the process. I mean,
Yeah,
all the songs are like, I mean, the Batman album, not the soundtrack from Danny Elfman, but like the Batman album that Prince wrote. The songs are incredibly well done, and they're each like individually supposed to be from a perspective of either the Joker, Batman, or Vicky Vale. Like it's
exactly.
so he
So,
did his homework. He was making music for this movie. It wasn't that I'm just gonna make
right.
a single and you know no, he made an album,
Let
which
me
is
ask, what do you think of the music of Graffiti Bridge?
so. Like I said, like earlier, that it feels not as sonically cohesive as Purple Rain, but it's great stuff. My favorite song is Elephants and Flowers, as crazy as that may come off. It's like it's a fun, energetic, like classic Prince song in it. Um, I think it is definitely like an interesting soundtrack. It's definitely like it's not entirely collaborative, but it does feel like collaboration. And again, it is almost like a taste of things to come with Prince and where he's going to go with his music, subsequently from this film. Do I think it's entirely memorable compared to Purple Rain? Not really. It's not a bad thing. I think it functions for the film. As an album, it's good music, but I don't think it's necessarily like the a strong soundtrack for a musical.
It's not a concept album.
No, no, it's not. It's again, like I said, a patchwork of different songs and different genres, but it's not bad.
Yeah, some of the music I really love. My favorite song actually is "The Question of You," and as
Oh,
I kept listening to that again and again, that is probably the most Purple Rain song on that
mm,
album because it
fair.
sounds like written during Purple Rain.
Mm.
I also really like "Thieves in the Temple," which was a huge hit for him,
Yeah, that's
and the song "Joy and Repetition," which is
mm,
so unusual when he and Aura are in that are in the alleyway and he's lifting her up. That's a very unusual. It's just such an unusual movie,
yeah.
and there's spiritual sort of spiritual messages and um you know I don't know. What do you feel about, and then I guess we'll close on this, but what do you feel about the resolution of the film of Aura getting hit by the car and everyone basically going to church when
I
Prince.
was so confused by that at first. I still don't entirely like understand. Just it felt like we got to wrap this up, so we got to kill Aura. um, but it does make sense in the context of like Aura being like the sacrifice, as like this muse, as this angel to come to provide deliverance to the kid and Morris Day and everyone living on that street with their clubs, and to bring peace. It is a bit hammy, um, but it does end it on a very positive note. And I think that's kind of the message of the movie is burying the hatchet and you know finding salvation. Um,
It's very
it,
stage music.
it's very stage musical like that. It's almost like I won't say like a passion play, but it's very much like a
Very
religious experience with this movie. And again, relating to like Prince's own spirituality and his religious upbringing, um, it makes sense. And the use of like a gospel choir, it's very apparent what this movie is, and it's very much the opposite of Purple Rain. I think even like Prince has gone on record saying like, this is not supposed to be like Purple Rain with like blatant sexuality. This is a spiritual movie. And this is where we're finding the kid in this crisis of his own faith, not being able again to deliver the music that like he feels he has the talent for or the passion or power to make.
It is though. It is very even the way that like the actual graffiti bridge in the film is that you can tell it's filmed
Oh,
inside.
it's such a set. It looks like a high school set. It's so cheap. It's so cheap.
I think it's unconscious slash conscious because I think this movie's. I prefer this as a musical because I feel like it's straight musical because it's the ending's very Godspell, very
Yeah.
Jesus superstar. I mean, not only with Aura, and then side note, love you, Prince. I love Graffiti Bridge, but how come nobody rushes to see what's wrong with Aura? They all just weep and stand there
Oh,
and
I,
like
I love that the like somebody call an ambulance and an ambulance just so happens to be right there. Like it's like again, I think they just ran out of money and they were just like, we got to wrap this up. Like, okay, we're all sad.
Yeah, Mavis Staples as Melody Cool, who I don't even think knows Aura is just leaping, and then
Yeah,
more
everyone.
like, and,
Yeah, everyone's just like, oh, it's so terrible, it's so terrible. Like, okay.
and I'm hoping that we would see Aura like acknowledge that she's an angel and be
Yeah.
like, my job's done.
Exactly. That seemed like it kind of was lacking there. And I mean, it's very much apparent, like, throughout her narrations and her appearance and beginning of the movie, like this is an angel sent from heaven to provide deliverance and spiritual inspiration to the kid and to make the world a better place than when she arrived in it. But the message kind of gets a little bungled, and I was a little confused too with like her like and her intentions. Like, seems like she was kind of working against the kid at some points and was kind of working with Morris Day, and it seemed like she was sort of like, I guess, playing both sides to find common ground. It's a really strange concept. Maybe it's a little high concept for what this was.
And
um
the alley with Prince is very Christ-like when he
oh
lays down.
yeah, it is. He is definitely playing up the messianic angle, or like a prophet. Not maybe not so much a messiah, but a prophet of this. But
And then there's a
yeah.
quote that struck me because I didn't catch it. I didn't catch it till last night. When Aura's a little bit drunk,
Mhm.
and more they said, "You got," and Jerome's there. He said, "You got sexy to your left. You got sexy to your right. It's gonna be a." He said, "It's gonna be a pimp sandwich tonight."
Morris Day in this movie is just like unbelievably like cartoonish. Him and Jerome are just like fantastic. It's they are almost like Disney villains in this movie. Like compared to like Purple Rain, they are just straight up cartoon characters, especially when Morris is trying to seduce Aura and like, gets her drunk and brings her to the, his apartment, and they're about to like, he's going to turn off the light and, do things with her. And then the kid comes in, swoops her away, and then you get Jerome. And like, they're just like, oh God, this has turned into like, a wacky comedy situation. But, you know, I,
Resolution. Go
what's
ahead.
that? Oh
As
no, but
someone
it's
who
just funny stuff. So
as someone who loves happy resolutions, I mean the ending, you get a happy resolution with Morris Day and Prince
yeah.
hugging, and all the bad beef that they've had between them for all those years in Purple Rain and now is gone. It's dissipated because of Prince's church service.
Yeah. It's so, again, I just think they just ran out of money and they just had to figure out an ending. But I mean, in terms of though, like what precedes it, um, I think it's supposed to be that like Morris Day does realize like the error of his ways and understands like, maybe I am the bad guy here. It's not just like him going against the kid. He's trying to buy all the clubs. He's trying to make it his own little empire on the strip. You know, it is the case of it being that, you know, he also had to have his own religious awakening to realize I have to be better. Kind of similar to like the kid in Purple Rain, that, you know, I have to overcome my internal demons, um, and face them and become a better person. If that's the message of the film, you know, taking away the religious, you know, symbols and all that. But it's interesting that like the difference between the kid facing his demons in Purple Rain compared to Graffiti Bridge, where in um, Purple Rain it's more internal, and then Graffiti Bridge is actually more external with the threat of Morris Day coming to take away the
Oh
club.
yeah.
You know, it's interesting like change of the dynamic of how or where we find the kid, and yeah, it you know it again it's I don't think again it's a particularly great movie. And there's really cool ideas in it. Its execution, unfortunately, is not exactly my cup of tea, but I can understand the appreciation from it from like someone like you that, you know, appreciates the type of film that it is in terms of its cinematography and its set design and all that. Um, I think definitely though it's the case of being like you have to understand what Graffiti Bridge is. It is, even though a sequel to Purple Rain, do not expect the same kind of movie. It is not a gritty, realistic take on the Minneapolis scene of the 80s. This is a heightened reality. Um, it is a musical very much in the style of musicals or even music videos of the time of, you know, 1989, 1990, that maybe Prince was stretched too thin in terms of just the type of work that had to go into it, that the budget was limited. So some of the ideas that maybe this movie was trying to present were not done the way that they probably should have been, that there was a lot of compromise with who would be in the film,
Yeah.
that it was also a launching pad for other artists that were part of the Paisley Park um, company that Prince had. But all in all, like I mean, I can't like, you know, I can't knock it down. It is a piece of art. You know, it's simple as that. It is a piece of art, and you know, it's financial, you know, failure. I think did help Prince like understand like, you know, the need of better collaboration, better communication, of taking some things, you know, and um, being more of a master of his own destiny. And it did help him eventually, you know, with his you know, his albums afterwards. You know, he formed New Power Generation because of this. He
Yeah.
formalized the band. The time, you know, like they did their thing, and you know,
So being the Prince aspect and your love of Prince and your admiration and adulation of Prince and all of that, if you look at these two movies separately and then look at them together, does Graffiti Bridge, in your opinion, bridge the gap or continue the story or finalize the story of the characters from Purple Rain?
it definitely finalizes it. It definitely is a coda, I think, to Purple Rain. Um, you know, the plot of Graffiti Bridge is kind of, I don't want to say like simple, but it is more determined or predetermined by the presence of aura as a plot device. I don't really get like the characterization of the kid as suffering from like you know, his own internal demons compared to Purple Rain. But it's not the same kid. Again, it's supposed to be time has passed. The kid has evolved into a club owner and a more spiritual person, a less violent person, which is important there too. Um, I think almost in a way, it's like Morris Day is like change, even though the change is like rather quickly. Um, the seeds for Morris Day to, you know, eventually at the end of the movie bury the hatchet. They're there. It's, you know, revisiting, I guess, old friends in that way. You know, going from Purple Rain to Graffiti Bridge,
It
and it
makes you wonder
ended.
if people didn't give it a chance.
Oh yeah, no, people did not give it a chance. In fact, I have a quote right here. This was from 1991, so we're talking 32 years ago. That Prince said of the Graffiti Bridge, it was one of the purest, most spiritual, uplifting things I've ever done. It was non-violent, positive, and had no blatant sex scenes. Maybe it will take people 30 years to get it. They trashed The Wizard of Oz at first too. And here we are in 2023 talking about Graffiti Bridge. And honestly, like I believe in that quote now. I believe that the movie was something that was made maybe at a time that was not the right moment in the culture to really have the appreciation. So
Like
today,
all festivals.
yeah, no, I mean, there's always a time and a place. I mean, for Purple Rain, I don't really consider Purple Rain a cult musical. It is recognized by the AFI. Like it is a national celebrated film. It is a mainstream film. It was a crossover event. There was nothing like it at the time with the way that the marketing was for that film. Graffiti Bridge is not that. Graffiti Bridge is a smaller, more intimate or spiritual film that a general audience probably would not appreciate at that time. To an
And
extent, maybe
they were probably expecting sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
they were expecting Purple Rain too. They were expecting Purple Rain too. That's as simple as that. And it's not that. It was never intended to be that. But I think under Graffiti Bridge definitely serves more as a cult film in terms of cult being that it has a niche audience that, whether they're Prince fans or they appreciate the type of musical that it is, that there's a love for it that it's unique to it compared to fans of Purple Rain. Anybody could love Purple Rain. Like it is a incredible album. It is a great movie. Anybody could go into it and get something out of it. Graffiti Bridge, I don't think is that. But when you get something from Graffiti Bridge and it clicks, then I think that's where like, yeah, this was good. There's an appreciation for this now. Like I think the audience for this movie, they've been born and they'll discover it and they'll love it for what it is, for all its faults.
This is a controversial question, but you as a Rocky Horror man, do you see almost how Rocky Horror and Purple Rain are very mainstream and how Shock Treatment and Graffiti Bridge are the misunderstood bastard stepchildren sequels?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call them the misunderstood bastard sequels, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with a bastard sequel. You got a lot of great bastard sequels, and I think that also is sort of like a little insulting. Like they are sequels. They are
No,
the
not me
continuation.
to others. They a lot of people
Oh yeah,
consider
for anybody to like sort of like put it down as that. Like I'd be like, no, no, no.
like Grease too. Like I people consider like I read an article, that's where I got that whole term was they called Grace 2 the bastard stepchild of the Grease fandom. And I'm like,
Yeah,
Grease 2 so much better than Grease.
Grease 2 is amazing, and
I like Graffiti Bridge has things that improve on Purple Rain. Shock Treatment I consider has things that improved on Rocky Horror. But I think so. Do you ever think one day that with this Prince Renaissance and his estate, could you ever see there being a double screening of Purple Rain or Graffiti Bridge, or do you see it just being like a separate thing? Like Purple Rain goes to theaters again, and
yeah,
some art house theater does Graffiti
I,
Bridge.
I would love if somehow Graffiti Bridge did find its way to the mainstream. I just unfortunately don't think that's really in the cards. It is such a unique film. Again, it's not particularly great, but it does have an audience to it. And what you said, like an art house probably would be better suited to it. Um, with Purple Rain, it's going to be celebrating 40 years next year. So that the estate, Warner Brothers, they're going to figure out a plan and they're going to media saturate Purple Rain. Graffiti Bridge, I just don't see that. It
And
it was
that's
just
okay.
which is a shame, like it does deserve a reevaluation, and maybe like when there's an anniversary for Graffiti Bridge that is worth putting it out again to the general public. I think that would probably be, you know, the best thing. And I don't think it would necessarily be like a negative. It is, you know,
No, absolutely.
33 years old, so give it
And
a
those
shot.
reviews that call sequels, bastard stepchildren, they just don't get it. They don't get it. I forgot if it was either Vice or I can't remember the name of the media that called Grease to the bastard stepchild. But I'm just saying that Graffiti Bridge is okay to maybe it's not meant for everybody.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say one thing that I've just blew my mind when I discovered it quite a few years ago. You've got Rosie Gaines, who eventually became part of the New Power Generation, and
Mhm.
then you've got Tevin Campbell, and were both in the Goofy movie as Powerline and his backup singer.
Yeah. So you do have connection there.
You, and it's so good, and I mean, it's just
Well, Tevin Campbell in
I
the movie, he steals that scene. Like his song, and he just shows up. And this is just talent that you're watching. This is raw talent that is happening. And there's a reason why he was a protege of Prince. It's right there. It was one of those moments, like um, definitely one of my highlights of that film is like young Tevin Campbell coming out and just like taking the movie away for like 5 minutes.
So with the two films that we've discussed, what do you hope Rain's legacy continues to be, and what do you hope Graffiti Bridge's legacy could be?
So with Purple Rain, I think not just as a film, but also just like as an album, is just this concept of Purple Rain that it continues and it functions as the introduction of Prince to a general audience, to people who are much younger than I am. Like I intend someday for my children to be able to listen to Purple Rain. We have a jukebox in our house, and we with real 45s. We have original 45s from Purple Rain in that jukebox. So that music will be part of their lives when the time comes. For an audience that they're finding music and they're trying to discover music outside of what's popular now. My hope is that not only just the album but the movie itself is something that resonates, because it really is. It captured a moment in time that few movies, especially like musicals, do. That it provided an insight to a musical scene, um, that not everybody was aware of. Um, that it it really was lightning in a bottle. That a perfect storm for this thing to be as popular as it was, and the fact that again we're almost 4 years out from its initial release, and t-shirts are being still sold, and posters are still being sold, and the movie's being re-released, and like it will always be in the public consciousness as long as the Prince estate wants it to be. And that's always a positive, because the man's music, regardless of the times or eras that he has, from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, they're all important. It is musical history. It needs to be respected, and it is film history, and it needs to be acknowledged. Now, with Graffiti Bridge, it is, it's not Purple Rain, it's not that, but it has an audience, and it will continue to develop an audience, as long as it's like provided its opportunities on a streaming platform. That's the way that it is right now. If there's any chance of it being as an Amazon Prime or a Netflix acquisition, it should be seen as much as it can be, because it really is something that should be watched, and I think it should be critically reevaluated today. um it deserves its chance. Again, it's been over 30 years, and like what Prince said, um it is something special to him, and that it was trashed in its initial release, just like the Wizard of Oz. And you know sometimes these things take time to become the cultural phenomenon that they are. But not to say that Graffiti Bridge will become a cultural phenomenon because of Zoomers, but you never know. Like, they may latch onto it. They may feel as though like this movie connects with their generation, or maybe the generation after them. We have no idea, but it deserves its time. It deserves its ability to be seen by a broader audience, and I hope that it somehow it can be. Yeah.
Also with Under the Cherry Moon.
Yeah, that too. I mean, like we only touched upon it, but like that's again, it was a swing and a miss in some ways for Prince, but at the same time, we're looking at it through the eyes of it when it was made, like
Right.
1986, 87, I believe. But today, we don't know what it would do. I mean, it was again a film that was done in a way that was the opposite of what films in the 80s were being or like being done as. And it probably should have a reevaluation as well.
And how brave to do it in black and white.
No one did black and white movies in the 80s. Like that is like right there. Like, is this an art house film? Like, no one did that. And it was marketed as a mainstream Prince film. And he's
I
directing
remember
it, writing it, like,
looked on
but
YouTube. I think MTV had a special on it or something, a premiere of Under the Cherry Moon.
yeah. And
Um,
of course they would, because again, like Prince was like one of the biggest stars in the world, but like I don't think it was like the same where like they kind of like touched on the cultural phenomenon that it was like, or what they thought it would be compared to Purple Rain. You know, it's a very very different kind of movie, even compared, like, yeah, especially compared to Graffiti Bridge. It really is almost like this throwback film that
I don't
was 30 years
recently
before.
bridge changed because it was an evolution of Prince, Prince, then Prince and the Revolution, then Prince and the New Power Generation. I wonder, and there's no way to ever fathom this. I wonder if it was Prince and the Revolution and Apollonia and Graffiti Bridge. Do you think it would have been
Oh,
different?
that's different. Okay, that is a what if that I'm not sure. Only because like the Revolution was very much a quintessential 80s act. And I think with Graffiti Bridge, and maybe it was smart on Prince's part to like create a new band,
Right.
um, because the sound had to change, and Prince was not the kind of artist that wouldn't wanted to remain, you know, doing the same thing. Like consistency is good, but like when you're not pushing yourself into new avenues and discovering like new ways of really creating art in terms of like music. New Power Generation was supposed to be the band of the 90s, and that Prince had to go into the 90s with a new sound. Otherwise, Prince is done. He would have been a dinosaur. And it happened to a lot of a lot of the contemporaries. The type of look and sound that Prince was doing in 84 was not what the world wanted in 1990. So I don't think it would have worked. I think
Of course,
the
because Madonna,
revolution was for its time, and New Power Generation was also for its time.
yeah, because Madonna Like a Prayer is completely different than Madonna Like a Virgin. And
Exactly.
Prince is, Michael Jackson's Dangerous is completely different than Michael Jackson's Bad.
Yeah.
So it needed to be done. So it's just an interesting concept. I wondered, you missed some of the characters. I missed Apollonia, and it was just different.
I
It
do
was
miss
just,
Apollonia. Yeah, Apollonia. I would have wanted to know what happened to her. As a character, she does have an arc in Purple Rain, and I don't think in Graffiti Bridge we could say that Aura has an arc. Aura is a plot device. We don't have a female perspective, and that's kind of something that, like, I mean, not to again to jump back to like a gender politics thing, but like women in these two films are kind of not like um mistreated.
secondary.
They're secondary, exactly. And like I wish like we would have gotten some more insight as to like who, or what purpose Aura is there for as a character.
Like
It's
ending the film with her, like coming down from the sky or something.
yeah, like it kind of feels like they're playing it maybe like a little too ambiguous, you know. But with Apollonia, like it would have been cool to like get some sort of reference to her, like what happened to her. Did Apollonia 6 take off? Are the kid and her like no her? It's like what happened, But sadly we'll never know. But it's okay.
but I appreciate you coming. And yeah, this movie, and I mean, it's just, even with Purple Rain, I always rediscover things. I mean, I'm just reconnecting with Prince again. I know it's as if I knew him. I didn't, but it was, so when you love someone enough, it feels like you reconnect with them when you revisit things. I mean, I recently just rediscovered the Gold album. I'm like, oh my God, Gold is now one of my favorite Prince songs. And it's
Yeah.
just, and now I have a huge new appreciation for Graffiti Bridge. Listened to the soundtrack the last few days, and I'm like, oh my God, this is Melody Cool and
Yeah.
Elephants Flowers and all these great songs. And I think it'll take time. Like with most cult musicals, it takes time before it to find its audience. But hopefully it's respected for what it is, and it doesn't turn into like one of those musicals that it's so bad, it's so good sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that unfortunately becomes a thing too. Like, we like it because it's bad. It's like, no, you are not getting it. Like, that is the last thing that you should be trying to push on, other folks, that like, you have to watch this because it's terrible. It's like, no, you have to watch this because there's something really cool here and different, and you may like it and you may not like it. But if you do like it, you're gonna like it for life.
Another weird connection, cult musical connection, is Jill Jones, who is one of Prince's protege, was in the movie.
Mhm.
She sang on the soundtrack of Earth Girls Are Easy. So, Gina Davis sang The Ground You Walk On
Yeah.
in Earth Girls Are Easy, but on the soundtrack, she doesn't sing. It's Jill Jones.
Okay.
So, it's another
I mean,
weird.
the connections are always going to be there. Like, I mean, when you think about like Hollywood, or just like, the music production industry, like, it's actually rather small. Like, the talent pool may be big, but it's always like the same, like, producers that, like, all right, I got somebody here that could do this. I have a session musician that works with Prince or whoever, like, it's very fairly easy to like put like a Venn diagram of like the spillover from like so and so is involved in this, and they're also part of this movie that we're going to cover. Or it's really just, it's a small town when you really think about it.
We've done that before on the podcast, talk about, oh my God,
Okay.
this has got a connection to Teen Witch. This has got a connection to Shock Treatment. Oh my
Yeah.
God, this connection to Bugsy Malone. Like they're all. It's just like you said, Hollywood is a super small town.
Hmm.
It's a super small town, but I thank you and appreciate you so much. Is there any tidbits that you would like to leave this episode with, either about Prince, Purple Rain, or Graffiti Bridge, or a combination of all three?
Hmm. I mean, I think it's just, in general, summing up like Prince, that this was a personality, this was a human being that really transcended a lot of things in his lifetime. And you don't really find artists today that are necessarily in that same wheelhouse. Like, you don't want to be like, he was like the modern day Mozart, or anything like that. But like, maybe in a few hundred years, historians will look back at Prince and be like, Prince was responsible for, this. And,
He was
um,
absolutely the modern day Mozart.
yeah, there needs to be not a reevaluation. I mean, the consensus is that Prince was like a musical genius, and that, we were all, fortunate that we lived in the lifetime that we could listen to Prince. Um, this was a person that did everything on his terms and was unapologetic about it. And whether you stuck with him through, his different eras of, you know discovering him from Purple Rain to, Under the Cherry Moon, to Graffiti Bridge, to even like his cameos on TV shows, or um, you know him and his exploits in the tabloids, that he really was one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, that everyone should, at some point in their life, listen to the Purple Rain soundtrack, and really just understand just how special this music that he was making was, because there was nothing like it at the time. Like, you really have to understand the history of what 80s music was in the early 80s, and understanding why this guy, this tiny man, like, he was not a tall fellow.
He's my
uh
height,
yeah, it's like, what, like 5'5",
5'2".
5'2". All right, so and just exuded like this energy that made him seem like he was like larger than life. And that whether it was the critical success of something like Purple Rain to a financial failure like Graffiti Bridge, it didn't matter. He was going to still do things on his own terms, and that should be the takeaway: to listen to his stuff, watch his movies, understand like why there is something special here.
You
And
touched that where I ran and get my book right quick. You touched upon something that I think he deserves. So there is now an academic journal
Mhm.
and an academic book that critically evaluates Michael Jackson
Oh,
called Michael Jackson Studies.
uh-huh.
And there's a website and there's a critical book of essays talking about Michael Jackson's music.
Yeah.
Prince deserves the same.
Oh,
If
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. He should be studied. Like like it sounds horrible, but like he should be studied by music
acad-
theorists, academic. It's like there needs to be like a really just like a breakdown of why this man was as big as he was. And
or look at spirituality in his works, looking at um, gender fluidity in his works, looking at bisexuality in his works, because there's some songs that allude to bisexuality, looking at the way that he plays with, different things. I mean, it deserves to be studied, and I think we're going to get there.
Mhm.
But I think, no, I think he's such an enigma,
Yeah.
so mysterious, and I think it's brilliant the way he had a mysterious aura, no pun intended, a mysterious aura about him. And I think if you watch Purple Rain and Graffiti Bridge and On the Cherry Moon, but those two films specifically, you look at a huge transformation of an individual in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Not many people do that, both creatively, spiritually, physically, professionally, besides Madonna and Michael Jackson. But I think Prince did it so it's documented on film.
Yeah. You do see it. Like you just nailed it on the head. Like it is the transformation of an artist who could have been just like, I mean, it wasn't a one-hit wonder, but he could
Mm-mm.
have easily fizzled out after something like Purple Rain, and yet continued to push on into different avenues, and especially bringing spirituality into his music. That could also be a turnoff for a general audience, yet it was not. It really was um yeah, mysterious, insurmountable. Like he just was something that so many different kind of words that you could describe him.
Even Purple Rain has some spiritual aspects. I'm your Messiah, and you're the reason why.
Yeah, yeah.
And when the Purple Rain tour, he had already converted to Seventh Day Adventist, so he said, "He's your Messiah, and you're
Mhm.
the reason why."
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's brilliant, and I think both of these films together are a unit. And I think it'd be interesting for people to start seeing them as a unit because you see two different sides of Prince. Prince is more mellow in this film,
Yeah.
and but yeah, I'll leave it with my favorite quote. He goes, "The king has arrived," and he goes, "I get." What does he say? What is Morris Day? Then who's the queen?
Yeah.
You know,
I remember.
and he pees on the bush and sets it on
Yeah,
fire.
yeah.
I remember. I'll never forget.
It's like, what is going on here? Like, it's just taking a piss on the plant. Like, that's his. And he's just
And
staring. Yeah, that's right. I'm peeing on your plant in your club.
I'll leave it at this. And this is kind of immature, but I mean, we'll end on an immature note. They always have that meme or that joke about like you can be watching a movie through the entire film, but people always walk in at the most inopportune times and see you.
Yeah.
I was on a church retreat watching Purple Rain on my DVD player, and
Mhm.
my headphones gave out, so I was watching it, and I got caught when the scene where that lady, she's like, "Fuck you, Morris Day! How do you do this?"
God.
He accosts Morris, and I think Jerome gets her and throws her
Yeah,
in the
throws her to the dumpster. What are you watching?
right. I was like, "Purple Rain," and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay." I appreciate you so much, and I can't wait to talk to
Yeah.
Helena about her love and appreciation of Graffiti
So,
Bridge.
hello everyone. We are continuing with the theme of Graffiti Bridge and Purple Rain, but now we're going to transition into talking about Graffiti Bridge with one of our returning guest host and her reaction, but also her analyzation of the infamous sequel to Purple Rain. So, um, I'm really interested to get your feedback and to get your analyzation of Graffiti Bridge. Now, was this your introduction to Graffiti Bridge, or is this your had you already had some sort of idea of what Graffiti Bridge was before we started talking about it?
I remember it when it came out. I mean, I grew up in a very small town, so I don't think we got Graffiti Bridge in a theater. I don't think it was that widely released, but I mean, I remember it being around. I remember definitely seeing the graphics for it at the time. And I was also kind of a Prince fan because I know after, I think Diamonds and Pearls came out after this, which was like my favorite Prince album ever. And I listened to that tape so much that I stretched it. It was one of those. But I was aware of Graffiti Bridge, but it like either wasn't at the video store or just wasn't in my vision. But I guess now it's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah, I told Polly that we talked about our love of Prince and how Prince was really important to us. He's a little bit older than me, so Prince was on my radar when I was 11, just randomly. Just randomly, he was on my radar at 11. I've always been that kid. Like at 5 years old, Dolly Parton was on my radar. At,
Yep.
at, at 5, it was Michael Jackson, then Prince. So Dolly,
Yep.
Michael, and Prince had a huge impact on my life, but didn't see Graffiti Bridge until I was, I want to say like 14. Because Purple Rain was when I first saw Purple Rain when I was 11, then Under the Cherry Moon, and then Graffiti Bridge. But it took me years, I want to say 3 times before I really started to appreciate Graffiti Bridge. So the viewers have already heard my reaction to how I think it's actually really good. And on some levels, I think it's superior to Purple Rain on some levels.
I agree. I agree.
I mean, Purple Rain soundtrack's better, of course. But anyway, I want to hear you sound off about your reaction and your why you love this weird sequel.
Totally. Well, I'll step back for 1 second. And I mean, having grown up in the 80s, I was going to say, sort of like a nature show host, it's like Prince emerged out of a bathtub in 1984, in my consciousness, anyway. I mean, he'd had some music video hits, so he was always kind of on the periphery, but he was always like, Prince inhabits his own sort of created, crafted universe. And I always have so much respect for people that do that. So it's kind of interesting that I hadn't seen Graffiti Bridge until you guys brought it up. And I was like, all right, I'll go to the video store, I'll rent it. And we'll, because I go to the video store and I rent things. But I know that he had done it right after he had done Batman. And so then I was reading about that and the whole thing about Madonna was going to be in it and play Aura. And I'm like, no. And then Kim Basinger was going to be in it and she was going to play Aura. And I'm like, no, no, don't do that. But I just thought it was just delightful. I thought it was delightful, and it put me in mind of so many other things. Was making me think of, oddly enough, it made me think of Rudy Ray Moore. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was the guy who played Dolomite back in the day. He was kind of like a blaxploitation kind of a dude, and there's a movie called Petey Wheatstraw, The Devil's Son-in-Law, that basically has almost the same plot as Graffiti Bridge. It has to deal with him. There's like people that are trying to shut down his club and all this kind of. So I was totally thinking about Rudy Ray Moore the whole time, which you could not have two polar opposite personalities. But I just thought it was kind of funny that, it called to mind that. And I loved too that it was all filmed on just obviously interior sets. So it was also giving me kind of Pirates of Penzance vibes where everything you could just tell is totally a set. I thought that was
yeah,
really
like I said to Polly, I love musicals that take place in a confined space where you can't escape it. Streets of Fire, Little Shop of Horrors, Shock Treatment, Dick Tracy, Bugsy Malone. And what I think is so genius about Graffiti Bridge is that it's all taking place in this weird, there's almost like a theory, I guess, in my head that maybe this is not really happening and this is in the kid's imagination. Because even the outdoor scenes at the Graffiti Bridge, you can tell are inside.
Completely faux. Yeah, everything is completely fake, and it's glorious. You are in Prince's domain, whatever domain that is. That is, you're basically inside his weird head.
Now, yeah, because it fell off my radar too. Because I knew from Prince's when I was like 12, I knew on the Prince fan board that there was a sequel to Purple Rain, but I thought it was Under the Cherry Moon because I was young and stupid.
Right.
And I was like, wait, this doesn't take place in the same universe. But then I saw Graffiti Bridge and I was like, oh my God. But then I saw it again at 23 and still sort of felt the same way. But then saw it recently and I'm like, this is actually a really good movie. I don't know what people are talking about.
I would say it's really good. It's really fun. I don't know about good, but I would say that it's enjoyable as a sort of pastiche of all things Prince. As a captured in amber time capsule of 1990, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, and it's like so spiritual and beautiful. And I mean, it's not Prince and the Revolution. It's totally Prince and the New Power Generation.
Very chaste. It's remarkably chaste for Prince.
Yeah, and he was quoted as saying that, it was the most purest and spiritual thing he'd ever done, and it's going to take like years before people get it. So were you surprised that, since you watched it and you rented it, which I can't believe that you rented it from a video store, Time
Movie
Machine.
Madness, Portland, Oregon.
What is it called?
Movie Madness in Portland,
Movie
Oregon.
Madness. We'll have to plug them. But when you saw it, like, what kind of expectations were you going in? Because it's a direct sequel. It is marketed as a direct sequel to Purple Rain. So what expectations did you have going into it?
I maybe tangentially knew that, but I didn't know that. So I kind of just started watching it and I'm like, okay, well, he's still calling himself the kid because I had seen Purple Rain at Peach's Crisis Midnight Mass in San Francisco all these years ago. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is maybe continuing kind of where we had with Purple Rain. So I got it. But it was so nice to see Morris Day and the Time again as these sort of goofy, I mean, very, very Rudy Ray Moore kind of villains, which are great, which I love. And they were camping it up, which is great.
Oh my God, yes. And it's sort of like the whole Shark treatment, Rocky Horror, Grease 2, Grease. People, you're talking again to someone who prefers most of those sequels to the originals. But I guess this is a question I'll reserve till later, but you can sort of think about it. Like, as a campy sort of spiritual, it sort of reminds me of Twist of Fate with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John.
Okay.
That's what it reminds me of a little bit.
Yeah.
Where the divine intervenes with and there's another movie like that where it's kind of like Xanadu where the divine where the divine has some sort of and
divine inspiration. Yeah.
And you brought up Kim Basinger. Apparently, according to Apollonia, an interview I watched at Apollonia, Kim Basinger was the one that came up with the story while she was dating Prince. And they broke up. And how Kim was supposed to be Aura, and then they broke up, and Prince had to rewrite the story a bit, but she came up with the weird divine intervention, angel angle. So it's interesting, but like knowing what it is and knowing that the infamous reputation that it has, even with some Prince fans, do you think it works or doesn't work as a sequel to Purple Rain? It works as an artistic piece, but do you think in some weird way it works as a sequel to Purple Rain?
I think it does. I mean, it's obviously much, 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 much lower budget. I think. I mean, I think the choice to have it not be set in a real world maybe was a misstep if you wanted it to be a direct sequel, because it also doesn't deal with the sorts of things that Purple Rain deals with, where you have the domestic abuse and you have all the other stuff, stuff. So it just makes it feel way more surreal and unreal than Purple Rain does. But I see the thread coming down from the previous movie, and also in the previous movie, it was a different club that was left to him. It wasn't the Glam Slam. It's like a completely different space. So if they had maybe tied it a little more to the original places in the first movie, I could get it.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that just falls off the radar. Like, I mean, and we were talking about like how a lot of Prince's music has transcended the films from which they're based. So Purple Rain, you can talk to people who know When Doves Cry, Let's Go Crazy, and Purple Rain without have ever seen the film.
It played in the grocery store today when I was in the store. I was like,
That's
I got to talk about this later.
That's cosmic. But also it's sort of like Prince's song Kiss, which is one of his biggest songs. It's from Under the Cherry Moon. It's actually performed as a musical number. And, Thieves in the Temple was a huge hit for Prince.
Love Thieves in the Temple.
But yet Prince fans and movie fans like yourself know this, but lots of fans don't even know that song's from this musical. And this is one of the only songs that was actually specifically written for the film. Because I don't know, like the most of the songs in the film, besides this one and Round and Round with Tevin Campbell, were sort of already recorded for other projects. And Prince put it together and then made Graffiti Bridge. Some of the songs were written for Batman. Some of the songs were written for his Crystal Ball album. Some were written for Brave into the Joy Fantastic. So, and etc. So, yeah. And it's like the music, the reason that I like Graffiti Bridge, it's so hard because yesterday was the first time I had seen it in forever. And like now I'm like defending it even more than I ever thought I would. Because Purple Rain's a musical for all intents and purposes. But the thing about Graffiti Bridge is that it's much more of a classic musical in terms of, and I can't remember the name. You might remember the name of when musicals that the musical sequences take place within that realm in the
diegetic versus non-diegetic. Yeah.
Yes, because so like
it's still it's technically it is a diegetic musical, although people aren't singing their lines, so it's not like an operetta or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely
except though, Feast in the Temple takes place as a musical sequence. So it's not sang in a club, and it's not sang. So I think it's much more of a classical musical than Purple Rain is.
I can see that. Yeah, totally. In other words, the music is just tangential to the action. In this one, it's more part of the action.
Right. So Purple Rain, like the only song in Purple Rain that doesn't take place in a concert is "Take Me With You." But this music is actually performed in clubs, but also performed as musical sequences, such as Melody Cool by Mavis Staples. And it's like, what? It's very unusual to have George Clinton.
Yeah. And Mavis Staples and Tevin Campbell and just
everybody.
Everybody.
And the kitchen sink.
And Ingrid Chavez is so lovely and so pretty. And she wrote Justify My Love, which is like the dirtiest song ever, which is just absolutely bonkers. Yeah,
I told Polly that. I was like, there's so many. This movie has such big legends, either legends that were to come, legends of the past, or legends who don't get the recognition they deserve. Like Ingrid, who wrote Justify My Love as a love letter to Lenny Kravitz. And then Madonna added a little bit, I don't know what lines Madonna added, but they were very few. But the
most 90s thing ever. I mean, again, the most early 90s thing ever of Lenny Kravitz, her, Madonna, Prince. It's just a melange of the 90s.
And she was, a protege. And I think everybody in this movie is a protege of Prince.
Yes.
Including Jill Jones. Jill Jones is in this movie, who is an accomplishing in her own right. But a lot of people shit on this movie because, especially critics, which I don't give a rat's ass about critics, but they called it superficial. They called it a vanity project. They
Oh yeah.
called it weird and hint. They called it, what's the word I'm looking for? Propaganda. Because they said that Prince was trying to push his Seventh Day Adventist message, which he probably was.
I can see that. I mean, actually, I can see all of those, and I think all of those things are great. Personally, I think all of
Yes.
those things that leveraged against this movie, those would make me want to watch this movie. I want to see Prince's Seventh Day Adventist propaganda film starring all of his proteges. That is a total vanity project where he is his hair is perfect in every scene, and he's dressed immaculately. He's wiry and weird, and no one would ever treat him the way these characters are treating him in real life. I mean, other than the fact that he's Prince. But
And he's very much a messiah figure in this movie. And there's so
yes,
many messiah symbolism.
you're making your own movie and you're the kid. I mean, shit, you are the Messiah.
But do you think so as a musical, I mean, as a musical, for you to rediscover this and watch it 3 times, which is a holy number anyway. Do you think as a musical, separate as from Prince and Purple Rain, do you think as like a really cheesy, culty musical, it works?
I think it's an undiscovered cult musical gem. I think that people need to come to this and watch it and be like, this is ridiculous. And like I say, it is the distillation of that 1990, the year 1990. If you took it and squoze it into a glass and drank it down, this is what it would be. You are mainlining 1990 when you watch this movie.
And there's also the question that I asked of, so when you think about like Rocky Horror and Shock Treatment, some people argue that it's a different Brad and Janet. Some people argue that it's the same Brad and Janet. I personally argue that it's the same Brad and Janet. Some people might argue that this is, even though it's Prince and Morris, I mean, it's the kid in Morris from Purple Rain, it's a different kid in Morris. Do you think that these are the same characters from Purple Rain and they just have grown intellectually and spiritually and emotionally?
I think they're the same characters. I don't think they're connected. I think this is like the further adventures of the kid and Morris, but like filtered through like a Saturday or Sunday morning cartoon. It's
Or
like
a Christian
or
cartoon.
like a weird Christian Saturday morning cartoon version of Purple Rain, if you will. Because like I say, Purple Rain was gritty. It had a gritty quality to it. And this is just like, we are going to be really spiritual and really clean and really not, I mean, yeah.
Well, Apollonia was supposed to be in this movie, but she turned it down because of money. And it would have been interesting to see, Prince and the Revolution were no longer a thing at this time. So there's no way that the Revolution would have ever appeared in this movie. So, do you think it would have added or detracted from having more characters from Purple Rain make appearances in this movie? Or do you think it just wasn't needed?
It's hard to say. I mean, in terms of it being commercial, then yeah, you probably would have wanted that in there. But in terms of it being a cult movie, no, you don't want any of that stuff. You want it exactly what it is, this sort of weird spin-off, weird thing that he just decided to do.
So when you watched it 3 times,
Three times in a row, okay?
Three
Three times in a row. I was like back to back. I just restarted. I watch it again.
Really?
Yeah, I was so charmed. I was just like, oh, that is just so cute. Put that on again.
So when you watched it, like, what was your reaction to it? Were you as if like, oh, it's so bad, it's so good, or did you think, wow, this is actually quite deep and beautifully done, or was it a combination of both?
I mean, obviously it meant something to Prince. Like I definitely get that this was Prince's coming out of his sort of spiritual shell and, kind of starting to get his philosophy down. And, but this is pure, I wouldn't say schlock, but it's just fluff. It's delightful, delightful fluff that Prince overlaid his spiritual message onto. And I have no problem with that.
Do you think that it's a movie that you would recommend people to watch as in like it's so bad, it's so good, or as like there is this really undiscovered gem that has a kick-ass soundtrack that happens to have Prince in it.
I would be like, I would have friends over to watch this just because it's fucking weird. Just an oddity. It's like, yeah, I mean, it would be a hard sell, I think, to have friends over to watch this, but I think once they started watching it, they would be like, holy shit, the fashions and the acting is so bizarre. And but the music is great. But I think it would be fun.
A lot of people don't even know about Graffiti Bridge.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I mean, I know about it as an album before this.
Yeah.
Tangentially there was a movie, but yeah, I think it needs to be, I don't know if I would put it up with like a glitter, maybe like Mariah Carey's Glitter. I kind of put it over in that category, but it would be nice to see it on a screen, on a big screen.
The way that the movie's told, it seemed, and the way that it's shot, and the way it's constructed and choreographed, it's very Broadway musical.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And it's very passion play. I mean, the ending's very Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes, it is.
I mean, especially with Aura's death and the song Still Withstand All Time, when Prince literally is carried like Jesus. So very like the Godspell. And you know, people, I mean, if you look at the comments online, people are like, oh, horrible movie, but great soundtrack. And I'm like, is it a horrible movie though? Like, is it like.
You have to have vision to see. I think people that have the vision to see cult musicals the way that you and I see them would probably see it and be like, this is rad. This is fucking rad. We're going to watch this again.
A lot of the movie musicals that we love there is sort of like Christian symbolism buried down underneath in terms of like the apple, of course. And Godspell and Jesus Christ Superstar and other, films with Messiah figures and things like that. And it's like taking the passion play and then just sort of reinventing it every time for a new audience.
This is passion play, but filtered through Prince. I mean, that's the weirdest, that's the delightful part about it, is it's that spiritual level of spirituality filtered through Prince, and it just comes out in this really weird expression. And that's always fun to watch when you see somebody have that experience, who just has the money to throw at something like this. I mean, any idiot can make a movie where they profess their religious weirdness, but if it's Prince, who has money, who has clout, who has songs, putting together a production on this magnitude, then that's like magic. That's like when the magic happens.
And Prince is the kid, and Morris Day have much more screen time and much more ability to act in this film versus the original.
Oh, you mean Prince had to act?
No, I think Prince's character, the kid, and Morris Day's character have much more. Well, they do. This is the first time they actually interact.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think they're given more dialogue and more scenes to act versus Purple Rain. There's so many characters in Purple Rain: Apollonia, Revolution, Apollonia 6, Billy the club owner. This is just the kid in Morris Day. And so they're given much more room to grow and to act.
And Prince continues his every scene. It's like, what is Prince feeling here? We don't know. It's okay.
But it's good to see the kid grow, because the kid obviously has overcome generational trauma and has overcome, maybe it's because of the death of his father, which we find out in Graffiti Bridge. His mother, unfortunately, from Purple Rain's now in an asylum. But he's grown, and maybe he outgrew the character of Apollonia, and because of his spiritual sort of quest that he's been on. And Morris Day, I think, is much more intimidating and evil in this movie.
Absolutely.
Murderous almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple scenes where he threatens the kid's life.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to blow up his club in the most worst way possible. How many times does he try to blow up the club? Like 3 times? It's ridiculous.
He pisses on his plant.
This is on his plant.
and tries to
Ah,
catch it on fire.
and
And
sets the plant on fire.
so who really is then the main character of Graffiti Bridge? Is it equally the kid and Morris Day that Aura that is
Well,
sent to save?
the main character is Prince. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, this is the Prince show, and Aura is here as a representative of his purity to save him. I mean, I
But
think off to the side, she's going to also save Morris Day if she can, but she's here for Prince.
what do you think
Heaven
of her character?
Center. What do I think of her character? I think it's completely silly. I think it's totally, absolutely ridiculously silly, but Ingrid Chavez is just so cute that I don't care. She's adorable.
She is, but the whole angel aspect, it's interesting that Kim Basinger wrote it and then Prince kept it.
Mhm.
Because, this movie didn't start off as a direct sequel to Purple Rain. It started off as a vehicle for the time. And it slowly evolved into the sequel for Purple Rain, and a direct sequel to Purple Rain. But I think it's because, you write what you write what you're going through. And so this is when he was toying with, this is pre-Jehovah Witness. This is with his very mystical version that Apollonius said of his version of Christianity, where he tried his best to inject reincarnation and the zodiac and veganism and Kabbalah, his own hodgepodge of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. So I think it was just him questioning life and questioning his own mortality. I know it's deep, but I mean, it's a deep film. It's silly in the way that it's done and the way that it's delivered. It's very hammy. But
It's
I
very
think
heavy-handed. Very heavy-handed.
do you mean conscious? You mean consciously preachy?
Consciously preachy, but I mean, it's like, this is the message. Do you see what the message is, people? She's from heaven. It's like, okay.
And Polly, I talked about it. The ending's very abrupt.
Yeah.
And it would have been better in terms of having a final shot that you see Aura sort of making her way back to heaven versus it just her disappearing.
You kind of do, though. I mean, you kind of get the idea that she's a spiritual being, because she also has wardrobe changes that are like, she walks around the corner and she comes back immediately and she's in a different outfit. So she's like the muse. She's like Kira. She's Kira from Xanadu.
Yeah,
She's
absolutely.
she's a being of light,
And if you remove, I mean, the whole point of Graffiti Bridge is the whole spiritual aspect of it. But if you remove the Aura character and sort of the angelic presence from the film, would there be any substance to it then?
At least it would be a fight between him and Morris Day. I think you would have to bulk up Prince's rationale for doing the things that he does more so, because he's just sort of reacting to whatever Morris Day is doing, and he doesn't really have any agency, I think, until he kind of gets more with Aura, and it seems like Prince just is sort of kind of floating through this movie, and Morris Day is kind of trying to antagonize him. It's odd. It's just odd.
It's a very God versus Satan, Jesus, light versus dark.
Prince is absolutely Jesus.
Oh, he even dresses in
Yeah.
Christ-like.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's wearing a garment that doesn't have any seams. Okay.
listen, I know that people call it a vanity project. Along the same lines of, I think years ago, I read an article, which I hate the media. I think people know I hate the media more than anything. I don't even read the media. But I think media kiss my ass. But then I think this was listed as one of the greatest vanity projects from an artist, and they compared it to A Mirror Has Two Faces with Barbara Streisand.
I can see that.
But I think the intention was not. I just don't think
Well,
Prince's
nobody makes a
intention.
vanity project intentionally. No one does that. I mean, you set out to make your movie. It doesn't become a vanity project until it goes bad.
I mean, you could argue that Dick Tracy was a vanity project
Oh, that's
for.
absolutely a vanity project. But again, vanity projects have a tendency to go bad. And that's just because you get too into it and then you overdo it. And I think that's what happened with all of these.
But I think Graffiti Bridge was not necessarily a vanity project in Prince's eyes. I think it was seen as, I want to save humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I want to save humanity's soul. I want them to find Jesus. And this is the way that, I mean, the ending of the kid basically converting the time with that beautiful church-like ballad. And now everybody's saved.
They ruined my skillet. I love the end where they like cover his stage in graffiti and he's like, ruined my skillet.
But like, that's the resolution. Because Purple Rain's resolution, I mean, the kid has grown so much. Because the resolution in Purple Rain is that basically the kid has learned from generational trauma. The kid sees that he's repeating traits from his father with women. Apollonia, for whatever reason, forgives the kid.
For no reason, yeah.
He writes Purple Rain, which is really his father's song.
And it isn't even his song. It's Wendy and Lisa's song that he puts lyrics to, so it's not even his song. Anyway.
And also he finds that sheet music in of his dad's, and so it's a mixture of that. And I think Apollonia sees that the kid's just troubled and she needs to give him a chance. But
he's a troubled young 40-year-old man.
And in this movie, the movie opens with the kid, I guess, no longer troubled by his past. I mean, he keeps writing letters to his dead father. And so I think the lesson that the kid character has grown a lot since Purple Rain. I don't think he's necessarily tied to the demons that bothered him so much in Purple Rain. Because I mean, one of the biggest villains in Purple Rain is the kid's own internal struggle with, do I repeat the cycle of abuse that's happened in the family? I mean, even Purple Rain has those spiritual elements. I mean, even I would die for you is very Christ.
Yeah. Well, and the mother says that, or somebody says that when the parents are fighting. I would die for you is like after the father gets hurt. So
the father says that after he beats the shit out of the mother, he's like, I would die for you.
Yeah.
And it's like
heavy. It's so heavy. I'm sorry.
But even sometimes that's lost on audiences of how, how Christ-like that movie is. And, the line of, I would die for you, I'm your Messiah, and you're the reason why. And so I think this is just, Prince was really enveloped in the spiritual movement.
Totally. And that makes it a good vanity project for us to all watch and enjoy. Because
do you think though, I know it's a vanity project. Vanity, no pun intended.
Except she's not in it. Poor Vanity. Poor R.I.P. Vanity. I mean, God, what happened to that woman? Oy. She was in that great movie with John Stamos and the guy from Kiss. Have you seen that?
What is the name of it?
Too Young, Never Too Young to Die.
Is there musical sequences in there?
Yes. Gene Simmons as the transsexual does like a burlesque number, and it's so hilarious. And I love it. And he wears the same costume that Linda Carter wore on something that she was on TV. It's absolutely just bonkers. And I adore it so much.
Like The Last Dragon.
Yes. It's like those two movies you could do a double feature of, straight up.
Yes. But
we digress.
Straight up, it's kind of funny because I think Paula Abdul was somehow connected to choreography in this movie or something. But I mean, I know it's a vanity project. I know it's cheesy. I know it's campy. I know it's all over the place. But despite all of that, and if we remove our this sort of like ha 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 laugh factor that we have with some of these movies, do you find it separate from Purple Rain, but do you find it to be touching in any way, or do you find it to be like, if we can push back against the campiness and some of the weirdness and things, do you find some depth and beauty in it?
I think the depth that you see in it is that Prince really believed this. That's where I see that it's deep. He obviously really believed that all of this stuff. Do I really believe all this stuff? But Prince really believed it, and it's adorable. It's like, oh, honey, you really believed in this. You made a movie, you expressed your spiritual self, you put out your piece, you put your music to it. Good on you. That's how I see it.
And I know we've talked about how amazing sort of those worlds are that some of these cult musicals inhabit, like Streets of Fire, Little Shop of Horrors, Dick Tracy, Bugsy Malone, Shock Treatment, where you can't escape the world. And that adds a different sort of element of claustrophobia to it.
Absolutely. I think that's why people hate these movies. Like, that's why
Really?
they fail. I really think, it's interesting because Little Shop of Horrors did well, but I definitely get that claustrophobic feeling from that as well.
Because I don't think people realize it was filmed indoors.
Maybe not, but it was more like a West Side Story. I think I kind of get the sort of West Side Story vibe from that. But a lot of these other movies, like Shock Treatment and like this, I feel very like you are locked into this world.
But I love that because it creates tension, and it creates it's like people are locked in an environment and they're forced to act.
It's like it's like you're having a nightmare that you can't escape from.
People, like some of the comments I've read before, because I still sometimes I read comments in her videos. I don't know why. People said that this is like a fever dream. They forgot that this movie actually existed. And I think it is very much like Shock Treatment and Dick Tracy, to where you can't escape the world. Streets of Fire is one of the greatest examples. And I wonder if I'd be really interested to talk to maybe somebody that's into architecture or someone that's into like set design, who what they feel about films that take place. But I just think Graffiti Bridge exists in that same realm and also deserves to be on the same shelf with those, that it's very claustrophobic where you can't escape it. And most of the scenes take place at night, which I really love as well.
Oh.
I don't know if you've ever heard of that Francis Ford Coppola musical, Once More with Feeling. Or no, not Once More. Not Once for More Fulfilling. One from the Heart.
Oh, One from the Heart. Okay.
One from the Heart. Yes, I'll send it to you. It's supposed to take place in Vegas, but for whatever reason, they spent a fortune with making it inside Las Vegas. And the entire movie takes place at night. Mm-hmm. So again, there's that element of not being able to escape. And some people don't like that, but I actually think there's something genius in very old Hollywood and very otherworldly about setting something inside. And the reason I love Graffiti Bridge is you can tell all of this is filmed at Paisley Park, Princess Studios. Mm-hmm. And even the outside scenes at the Graffiti Bridge. Do you think it's consciously supposed to look fake, or do you think it's unconsciously supposed to look fake due to budget restrictions?
I imagine it was probably a lot of that was budget. I think they did the best they could, but I think the bridge personally looked a little spray foamy to me. But
I like to think that I don't know. I know that it's not that deep of a movie, but I'm wondering if like it was done to show the superficiality of our world or something.
How our world, any intention behind it. I think it was just like, I think Prince said, hey, make a bridge here, put graffiti on it, light it with some purple, we'll be fine. And
yeah, possibly. I like to think that everything was consciously done.
That some of the best things are unconsciously done, though. That's the beauty. That's why these things come out so well, is because someone didn't exactly think it fully through. It was kind of like somebody said, this is my world. I want a bridge. I want this. I want that. And somebody just went off and was like, all right, I'm a stage designer. I'll make this set, I guess.
And what's unusual is that, this still takes place in Minneapolis, and it's still filmed in Minneapolis, but in Prince's house. And I think, honestly, the reason
Minneapolis Prince. Yeah, it's a fake Minneapolis. It's like the upside down of Minneapolis.
I don't know what, Lord, you always bring the depth out of me. But I wonder if the reason that he decided to shoot it in Paisley Park, not only because of budget, but this was sort of like the end of his relationship with Warner Brothers.
Mhm.
And I think he wanted as much control of his project that he could get. And so if he filmed it at his own house, his
That
own
makes sense.
studios, on his own dime, who could
Mhm.
tell him no?
Exactly. Glorious.
Because I think Under the Cherry Moon was filmed in the south of France.
Oh goodness, yeah, I don't know much about that one, unfortunately.
It's a black and white Prince musical.
I'll have to go check it out, because now I'm obsessed with Graffiti Bridge. So
it's Under the Cherry Moon it's not connected to Purple Rain at all, but it's like he plays a character named Christopher in an undisclosed time, and it's in black and white, and drums in there from the time. But I guess my point was just that I think to have it sort of consolidated and to have it sort of it's very much like how Michael Jackson did a lot of things in Neverland. It's where they can create their own world that they can control and manipulate. And I think that's why one of the reasons, and budget, because Prince funded this movie himself, Apollonia said.
Yeah, I believe it. It
only
shows.
seven.
It's great in a great way.
But I think it was all about the control factor, because he was a control freak, for better or worse. Now, the music, of course, of Purple Rain is so timeless, you can't escape it. It's part of the American consciousness and our cultural fabric.
Yeah.
What do you think about the soundtrack of Graffiti Bridge? I mean, there's so many good bangers. Some of them don't fit. Some of them are like the George Clinton number's a bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mavis Staples song's a bit unusual, and even the Tevin Campbell song's a bit unusual. But what do you think about the music of the film? Is there any particular songs or a song that stuck out to you?
Oh, I loved them all. I mean, of course, I really love Thieves in the Temple. Personally, that's like my absolute favorite. I have that in rotation on my iPod. So,
oh my God, I love how you said iPod. Oh, I love it.
Like that. Yeah, that's probably my favorite song out of it. But I mean, all of this is Prince canon, so you can't escape it. It's going to be ever present in popular culture. I mean, it's not as much as Purple Rain, but all of these songs were that era of Prince, which is
the New Power Generation.
Yeah, New Power Generation, and I loved that era. That was like probably my favorite era. Probably more so than the '80s songs, honestly.
Well, when you think about it, like I really when I was obsessed with the Prince, like one of my favorite albums was Diamond and Pearls, because that's one of my favorite Prince songs. I love Cream, which is the New Power Generation.
Okay.
I love the Gold Experience, which is New Power Generation. I love the song Gold. That's one of my favorite Prince songs. And so I don't think that the New Power Generation was manufactured music. I just think Prince was now took on a less rock feel, and he was incorporating a lot of like R&B and a lot of hip hop, and he was reinventing himself. And I think Graffiti Bridge's music reflects that transition from rock to hip hop and R&B. And I love there's some beautiful songs in this movie. My favorite song from this film is The Question of You. And then I like the song Joy and Repetition, where it's a very weird song. And I don't know, I'm not going to sing it, but it's like, there's joy in repetition. And it's like spoken. And it's when he and Aura are in the alleyway. And Thieves in the Temple is beautifully done. And I think it's like, I do think that song is reminiscent of the demise of his working relationship with Warner Brothers.
Oh yeah, well, and it also the song that isn't in this movie that is that same thing is Seven, talking about how all seven will die. They're all like seven studio execs from Warner's. So Prince, the Prince of Subtlety.
And I don't know. I need to go back and right. I need to go
Yeah.
back and look at it. But even the title song "Graffiti Bridge," I don't know if it's actually in the film.
Mm,
It's on
I
the album. It's on the album, and it's a beautiful song. But I think as most people know, Prince fans know. Well, good Prince fans know is the whole reason that he changed his name to the Love Symbol is because he was still contracted with Warner Brothers, and he still wanted to release music, and so he's like, okay, I can't release music under the Prince name. I'll just release it under this undisclosed symbol.
the artist
So
formerly known as Prince. Yes.
yes, which I came to find out, was a name that the media gave him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because you could say you can't pronounce this the symbol, the sigil. So artist formerly known as Prince.
I loved it. But I do think that a lot of the lyrics, like, they don't care if they hurt you. No,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care. How's it go? What is that lyric? What is that line? They don't care how they kick just as long as they hurt you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was very
There's,
bitter about Warner's.
and they did this movie, and I think this was just the end. I think he had it with
It
them,
was. It's
and
just a big. It's a big fuck you to Warner Brothers for sure.
I think he's discovering it. I think the Prince that we see in Graffiti Bridge is the Prince that we were left with. I think this is when he really shifted and changed and became the soft spoken, spiritual, no drugs or drinking or meat in my presence person that he became.
Mhm.
The whole I'm only going to be a one woman man sort of thing. So I think this is his reinvention. And I think it's
Like,
one of, I think he was upset because people didn't get that. I think he was reintroducing himself to the world as like this new, I
mhm.
don't want to say woke because it's not woke,
I'm sure
awakened.
he was marketed as something he did not probably want to be. I
You
mean,
mean,
like any star of that era, it's like once you get to be as huge as like a Prince or a Michael Jackson, you are that creation of the marketing. And I think this was probably him saying, no, you know what, I'm really not about all of that kind of sex and rock and roll kind of thing that I was in the 80s. Like this is more like what I'm actually at. And I have a feeling he probably didn't make this movie to make money for Warner's.
I don't think so.
No, I think he just did what he wanted to do, and that's also why it's wonderful. Like we talked
It
about.
wasn't even promoted.
No, yeah. I mean, he was probably contractually obligated to make a movie or to make products or to make an album. So he's like, sure, I'll take your money, but I'm gonna make Graffiti Bridge and fuck y'all is basically kind of what this is, I think.
When
We're
I
just gonna
told
fuck around
Paul,
and have a good time.
right. And like I told Polly, I mean, I wasn't around in the 80s, but any any anybody would know that it was Prince, Michael Jackson, Madonna, and
The triumvirate, yeah.
they've all done something similar to this in terms
Mm-hmm.
of a spirit. Madonna did Like a Prayer. I mean, the Like a Prayer Madonna was extremely different than Like a Virgin Madonna, even the true blue Madonna.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Prince appears on Like a Prayer and on the song Love Song. And Michael Jackson, his Dangerous album was, you couldn't go farther from bad or Thriller. So,
Mm-hmm.
and and it was completely R&B. Remember the time, hard rock. This was similar to what Madonna and Michael Jackson were doing as this is me new being an awakened spiritual person. Um, this is me taking a new direction with a new band and a new image and a new look. And I just don't,
George Michael did it too,
right.
if you remember. Yeah.
And Madonna.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand. And the weird thing is that even though this movie did terrible, it didn't even make back its budget, the soundtrack was a critical success
Oh,
and was
absolutely.
and massive.
Mhm.
And does that say something about the movie going audiences that they're able to forgive a film of its
I would imagine there was not a very large movie going audience, but there was a large audience for sound for Prince albums.
But
So
isn't that weird though?
not really. I mean, Prince, any album that Prince made would mint money, basically. So I mean, people are going to buy anything that he would have made in that era. They bought anything Madonna or Michael Jackson made in that era. So it's like he knew he was going to make his bank off of it, and he got to make this sort of spiritual statement on the side that was also kind of a quiet fuck you to Warner's. So he got everything he wanted out of this, I think.
And it's weird because like even Kiss and the soundtrack for Under the Cherry Moon, which is called Parade, was a huge. I mean, it's that iconic picture of Prince doing this little number.
Yeah, yep.
That was a massive success.
Yeah.
But yet people forget that it's from a film, and it's like I don't know. I'm just trying to put myself in Prince's high heels and wonder how it would feel to be like the audience, the general public buys your album, makes it number one. Again, see, they did the same thing to Under the Cherry Moon, but they won't see the movie.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think you have to take your wins where you can get them, honestly. I mean, I imagine that he had an image of himself of what he was, and he thought that was an actor, and he thought that was this and that was that, but on screen it's just weird. And, that just happens.
If this was on your radar in the 1990s, I'll ask
Uh-huh.
this question. You had seen Purple Rain, you're a massive Prince fan, you're one of the purple ones. And then you see this movie's marketed as a sequel because I watched the trailer again and it's like The Kid, Morris Day,
Mhm.
blah 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 blah. And you went to go see Graffiti Bridge. How do you think 90s you would have reacted to this musical?
I probably would have liked it. I might have become mildly obsessed with it, I think. I probably thought it would have been cool because I always liked the sort of outsider art kind of things like this.
And so, like now that you watched it, why do you think that you like it so much?
Like I say, it's just sweet. It's a very sweet movie, and it's like it is a bless your heart movie. It looks cute. All the acting is cute. I think Morris Day is funny and Jerome is funny. Like the part where they accidentally make out with each other is super funny. You ruined my skillet. I love that. It's just all that. It's a goofy little vanity project, and I already know that I love those. So that's why
There's
I
a
like.
line. There's a line that I didn't catch until I rewatched it last night, and it's when Jerome and Morris try to get Aura drunk,
Mhm.
and then she's a little bit tipsy, and he goes, "Sexiness to your left, sexiness to your right. It's gonna be a pimp sandwich tonight." And I'm like,
I
"Oh my
love that
god!"
line. I loved that. I was like clapping on my couch. I was like, yes,
Let me tell you something.
sandwich.
This is the first time I've ever admitted this. I don't have any shame. I've always had, it's not even a weird crush. I've always had a pretty massive crush on Morris Day. And it's really weird. I just find him attractive, but I love his arrogance.
Yeah. No, he's like I say, if you ever watch Rudy Ray Moore movies, he is that guy from that movie. It's super fun. It's fun to see sort of an old school kind of, cock of the walk kind of thing like that. It's really fun.
And the way that he dresses, the whole glitter and gold and things,
Oh, like the nudie suits and all this stuff. I love that too.
it's kind of like a Dick Tracy character.
He is literally like a 1940s, 50s dandy kind of
Zoot,
guy.
zoot suit sort
Kind of
of.
zooted out, yeah.
But so yeah, as a musical, so what do you hope that Graffiti Bridge's legacy could be?
I'd like to see some screenings of it. I'd like to see a print of it circulate around and be shown, kind of like New Bev Hollywood video, Hollywood theater sort of thing. I'd like to see it make the rounds of like Alamo Drafthouse and kind of be brought back, sort of like other movies have similarly. Like I know like Xanadu and The Apple had kind of a moment where it came back on Blu-ray, because I think the Blu-ray that was made of this wasn't like tied to a re-release, where the best Blu-rays are tied up to re-releases and they come out and they have shitloads of features and it's really cool. So it would be nice for somebody to put this back in the consciousness of people who care about movies the way that you and I do.
Well, the Prince estate put it together in a pack with Under the Cherry Moon and Purple Rain in a
Yeah,
beautiful set.
it's not how this should be, though. I mean, I get it. I get why they did that, but I would like to see like not director's cut, but like a 4K restoration of Graffiti Bridge on its own, and then a 4K restoration of Purple Rain on its own, and Under the Cherry Moon, like all on its own, each one with its own like associated featurettes and things like that.
I would like to see the remaining cast talk about
Totally.
Graffiti Bridge.
I want to hear about what it was like on set and all the weirdness, and yeah.
So I guess the last question I ask about the whole legacy is that would you see this as being a screening of like, a la Best Little Whorehouse and the Apple in some sort of like the theater that you love and frequent that does like cult movie musicals,
Absolutely.
like Howard the Duck, or
Mhm.
could you see it taking that route, or hoping that it would take that route, or could you see it being like play with a double feature of Purple Rain ever? Do you think it would ever be played with as a double feature of Purple Rain?
I think that would be boring, personally. I think that would be a lot. That would be a lot of Prince to get through at one setting. I would just like to I like Graffiti Bridge to be presented on its own. It's not overshadowed by anything. It's just like, here is this weird movie that we dug up that you may or may not remember. Let's watch it in its entirety and just judge it on its own.
A lot of movies are like, I know Michael Jackson's Moonwalker was accused of being a bunch of music videos tied together with no narrative or plot, which it does. But do you think there is a plot worth underneath the beautiful filmed musical sequences? Do you think there is a plot that people be like, okay?
I think people will probably more be like, this is how I think it's like I'm focused on like, this is Prince's world, and we're looking at it, we're watching it, not like, hey, this is meaning, this is what Prince was going through at this time when he made this movie. And I think that's the most interesting aspect of it, more so than it like teaching us a lesson. I mean, it teaches us the lesson of, this is what Prince wanted to do with his life, and that's the cool part of the lesson.
Even looking at the poster at the particular moment, I mean, it's very different from Purple Rain. Purple Rain's iconic poster with Apollonia standing on the stairwell and this smoke and Prince on a motorcycle. This is very esoteric. There's lots of,
It's very graphic design wise, it's very of its time, where it was maybe even done with sort of beginning kind of digital tools, where you just had a lot of disparate elements kind of tied together.
Like Prince. And I think Prince maybe possibly had done this poster. I mean, you've got aura, you've got, looks like Kabbalah symbols, you've got the pyramid, you've got Morris Day, you've got some scripture, or is that a window? You've got a desert and a tree and a lady, and it's very esoteric and very occult. And it's maybe that put people off. I don't know. I don't know why people didn't rush to see this movie.
I just don't think it had the push. I don't think it had the push that other movies had. I think it was kind of like, you guys want Graffiti Bridge? No, okay, here's the Graffiti Bridge. I think it was kind of like,
And the weird thing was that this wasn't released at a time where Prince was sort of out of the public consciousness, or he was a has-been. It's because he had just done Batman.
He had just done Batman. So definitely this was kind of like, this is like a little afterthought that Warner's kind of probably just allowed him to do. And so I don't think, because of Batman.
Or because of contractual obligations.
Exactly. He was promised X amount of money. You have to deliver a product for X amount of money. So go ahead, make your silly movie and we'll just bury it. It's fine.
Is there anything about Graffiti Bridge that you prefer over Purple Rain? And that's blasphemous.
Everything. I'm sorry.
Really?
I don't have any necessarily any love for Purple Rain. I think Graffiti Bridge is more eye candy for me. Like I say, it's like all of the design trends of, because I'm a graphic designer, all of the design trends of the 90s are distilled into Graffiti Bridge, and I think it's much more interesting to look at.
I did not know that you didn't have some sort of nostalgia for Purple Rain. Like it didn't ever.
I didn't see Purple Rain until like the early 2000s.
Oh,
Because
wow.
again, as I've explained on previous podcasts, between 1982 and 1993, my family didn't go to see movies because my mom hated
Right.
E.T. that. So there were no modern movies in that time frame. So no Purple Rain, no Batman. Didn't even see Batman.
Oh, wow.
I know.
So
Child
Purple Rain,
abuse. Child abuse.
nah. So Purple Rain really wasn't on your radar in terms of things. But
Nope.
also, once you got to see Purple Rain,
I was
I
kind of
mean,
like,
Purple,
eh.
did
I
you
felt
did
the
you
same way. I felt the same way about Purple Rain as I felt about seeing Dirty Dancing for the first time. I was like, oh, okay. Like, all
Yeah,
right.
I felt the same way about Dirty Dancing because I it was really hyped up, and once I finally saw it, I was like,
Mhm.
eh. Same thing
Yeah.
with Grease.
Really?
Because same thing with Grease. I mean, I remember the first I was my parents were really religious, and I won't digress. It's weird. My parents were religious in some aspects, but yet they bought me whatever movie I wanted when I was 8. First time I saw Purple Rain, I was 11. I was just
Nice.
pushing the cart through Walmart, and I was like, I want that movie. And my mom was like, okay, whatever. Same thing with like Rhinestone and Showgirls. Um,
Okay.
but like, I remember being, my mom was really weird about like not letting me watch any movie that said goddamn. That was the only thing she cared about because she was religious.
Okay.
So she just didn't want any movie that said
Huh.
goddamn in it.
All right.
So, and
Showgirl's
she,
totally okay though.
well, because I snuck and watched it, and I don't think she knew. Because I mean, it was also because it was Elizabeth Berkley from Saved by the Bell, so it's
She's clean.
like,
She's fine. Yeah.
right, even though she's straight up
Sweetheart.
nude on the cover. But with Grease, it's like I watched the VHS. My mom bought it. Do you remember Media Play? Did you get Media Play in
We
Oregon?
had media play here, yeah.
So I remember it was my dad was out of town, and my mom bought me Grease and Grease 2, and we watched Grease and Grease 2 while she was fiddling and doing things. In Grease, I was like, okay. But then right after that, I watched Grease 2, and I was like, I like Grease 2. And I brought the VHS. My mom had a VHS player in her van, and I took it to school and took it to
Good.
like, I just always gravitated towards Grease 2. I just didn't understand it. Purple Rain though really was on my radar, and it like
Mm.
solidified my love of Prince, and it was a huge experience for me. And so I was disappointed with Under the Cherry Moon and Graffiti Bridge, but then after really, I guess with my own spiritual awakenings, I think Graffiti Bridges, there's no sex, there's no drugs, there's no
Sure.
rock and roll,
No one says damn.
there's no abuse, there's
Mm-mm.
no, it's as if the characters have learned their lessons. And I like that. It's resolution because I'm the kind of person that has to have resolution in films. I don't like open-ended,
Mm.
weird. So like I like Shock Treatment because it gives Brad and Janet resolution. And they change because Brad and Janet to me, and I promise you I'm gonna digress. I'm just tying into why I defend this movie is because, the Brad and Janet of Rocky Horror are super obnoxious and are super Rocky Horror fans are gonna come for me. I don't care. They're obnoxious and they're
They have
unlikable.
no agency.
They're unlikable.
And they're unlikable. Yeah, I agree.
And they have no values or nothing driving them. It's like you said, they have no agency. They don't fight against being manipulated.
Mhm. Yeah.
But Shock Treatment's Janet
Mhm.
is astounding, and Shock Treatment's Brad is not so much of a P word in
Sure.
terms of being manipulated, and
Mhm.
so I like this whole, and I like Grease 2 better because those characters are not obnoxious. Those characters, I mean, Stephanie Zanoni changes for nobody. And so like Grease, but so I think with this, it's like I like it because it gives the resolution of the kid in Morris Day. And you see the kid changes and you see that the kid sort of breaks the cycle and breaks the chain of like generational trauma. And it's
Mhm.
unfortunate that like we don't know what happened with him and Apollonia, but I think Apollonia would not work in this movie because
No.
where would Aura take
Mm.
place? Would she be his mistress or something? His angelic mistress?
Right. Yeah.
So I think she came to him because he needed her at that particular time. So I don't know, I don't think the revolution or Apollonia are necessarily needed for this movie, and I like it because it gives resolution to characters that I really care about, I guess.
And Aura is like the perfect sort of silent woman character. That's why Madonna or Kim Basinger couldn't play that role, is because Aura just kind of comes down and is like, oh, and it's like there's not much. I mean, she does talk, but there's not much characterization to her or personality to her.
I really like how
she's holy.
Right. I really like how we get her internal dialogues through narration of like her really breathy saying, he hasn't learned the lesson yet.
Yep. And she's dropping feathers everywhere. It's like,
and there's always, of course, the well-known trope of the angel gets sent down and ends up falling in love with a human. I mean, how many times has that been done?
But she doesn't even fall in love with him. She just kind of is like teasing him and tempting him to be better. So there's no like love story there. And then she gets hit by a car.
Yeah. And it's
for no reason. I mean, why is that guy even in a car? There's no reason for that guy to have gotten in that car. Anyway.
What did you think? What did you think of that?
What? Why did he just? Okay, she said.
And then
she said she wasn't going to be here that long. I was like, all right.
And nobody rushes to help her.
No, and she's. I mean, he just winged her. He didn't even hit her. She just kind of bounced off the side and was like on the ground, and she's like, oh, dead.
But it's very much like Michael with John Travolta. Did you ever see Michael?
No. I'm gonna hard pass on that one.
And it's kind of like Whitney Houston's The Preacher's Wife, where like the angel always comes down and falls in love with the person. And so there's like sexual temptation of like some angelic being in a human. But I don't think there's much of that there. And Prince was quoted as saying, because he kept trying to pitch it to Apollonia, and he kept saying, "This is the Wizard of Oz. This is the Wizard of Oz." And she didn't get it, because I watched that interview. She didn't get what he meant. And when this movie flopped, he was quoted as saying, "This is the most spiritual, the most real, the most deepest thing I've ever done." And he said something along the lines of, "The Wizard of Oz was torn apart when it first came out as well." And he said, "This might take 30 years for people to get it." And I think maybe people would get it now. Maybe.
I know you want to believe, honey. I know you want to believe.
Like Santa Claus.
They will get that Prince was a very spiritual gentleman. Then that's where I just have to leave it. They will believe that Prince had a very clear idea of his spirituality. And that's why we love him. God bless him.
And it introduced Tevin Campbell. And it introduced the new power generation. And it reintroduced, because Ingrid Chavez, this is basically the same year that Madonna did Justify My Love.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, I mean, this is a huge time where like a lot of important things were happening in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And sideline, Tevin Campbell, of course, went on to do a Goofy movie and play Powerline.
Nice.
And with the lady who plays the big lady who sings, that was Rosie Gaines, who was in New Power Generation.
Oh, fun.
So there's that connection.
I never saw that one, but that's cool.
You never saw the Goofy movie?
I'm kind of old for that, I think.
It came out in 95, though.
Oh no, I was graduating high school that year, man. I was in college. I didn't got time for that stuff.
And the lady, Jill Jones, the lady that throws her panties at Prince, and the one that's like fights with Prince in the movie, she was a protege. Prince had so many proteges, as you know. Some of them went on to do things. Some of them didn't go on to do things. The Earth Girls are easy soundtrack. So Gina Davis sings in Earth Girls Are Easy. She sings the song The Ground You Walk On. But for whatever weird reason, she doesn't sing on the soundtrack. Jill Jones does. And Jill Jones is the lady that was in this movie that threw her panties at Prince.
Oh, funny. Mm-hmm.
So there's that weird cult musical.
It's always such a trope of like women taking off their panties in these movies. Women aren't going to do that. That shit is expensive. It's not.
That's not hygienic either.
It's also not hygienic, and it's also kind of drafty.
I mean, I think that's the whole male fantasy of like women throwing their panties.
That's like whenever women hang out in the evening, they get in their jammies and they hit each other with pillows. It's just not true.
apparently, I don't know what, because I was reading a timeline of like Prince and Madonna's relationship slash friendship slash enemy slash frenemy friendship. And apparently, uh, during one of his tours, every night Prince brought on a pair of Madonna's panties that he
He would.
got
He would. I believe it.
that he got from a tryst in a limo with her. So
Okay, one woman in history has given up panties. Okay. We have a verified case.
so to close this out, we already talked about the legacy, but is there anything about this film that you find just ahead of its time?
I think this is a straight up, good old fashioned, lovely, wonderful relic of its time, vanity project, distillation of Prince. But I think it's just, it just deserves rediscovery. That's all I can really say about it.
Do you think it's going to be one of those musicals that you revisit from time and time and again?
I'm already ordering the Blu-ray. It needs to go on the shelf with the Apple and with Shock Treatment and with the others.
Would you get the so the Blu-rays you can get the Blu-ray in a set with Purple Rain. Will you just like bypass Purple Rain altogether and just go straight into Graffiti Bridge?
What do you want me to say here?
No, the truth.
No, I'm totally going to bypass Purple Rain because I don't care.
That's
I'm
great.
sorry. I'm really sorry, but I can't be bothered to watch that again. I watched it again for you to potentially talk about because I know we didn't get to, but
But the thing is, I wanted to talk to you about Graffiti Bridge because you are like obsessed with it now, and it's a great perspective to the other guest who's like, it's a good movie, but it's not. It's no Purple Rain.
no Purple
you know?
Rain. Well, you know what? Purple Rain is no Graffiti Bridge, Mister.
And just like Grease is no Grease too. Like, I'm sorry, you could literally not give me a copy of Grease. I won't watch it. It's just because I get it. It's part of the American fabric and American consciousness. But
John Travolta sings a song about wrapping his dick in plastic wrap. How could you
Wow.
not love Grease?
I just like Grease too. It's very 80s, and it's Michelle Pfeiffer is so gorgeous in that movie.
I grew up with Grease, so I am a Grease apologist. I like Grease. I'm sorry, and Olivia Newton-John, for crying out loud. Michelle Pfeiffer is Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, that's apples and oranges with Olivia Newton-John.
We can agree to disagree.
We'll have to agree to disagree. It's okay, my friend.
But
it's all right.
But I consider Graffiti Bridge on the same level I consider it an equal to Purple Rain. And there's some people who will argue against that, but now that like I've rediscovered Graffiti Bridge and I have a new love and appreciation for it, I will always tie those two together. I won't ever separate Purple Rain from Graffiti Bridge again.
If you have a history with Purple Rain, that makes absolute sense.
And I'm glad that you feel this way, and I'm glad that you've ordered the Blu-ray. And I think like this could be one of those films you introduce your friends. Like, have you ever seen? How would you introduce it though? As the campy Prince musical or the sequel to Purple Rain?
I would say, come and look at this thing. I would say neither. I would say, have you seen this shit? Come and look at this. This is fun.
Because it could completely exist outside the realm of Purple Rain.
Absolutely.
Because there's only
Prince. I mean, it's the thread of Prince. It's the magnitude of Prince, really.
I mean, those characters could completely exist without having any ties to a previous story arc.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that you have that perspective on Graffiti Bridge, and I'm glad that you have a newfound love and appreciation for it, and you defend it. Well, hopefully you defend it.
Thanks for making me do the pod about it. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that you have a love for it, because when you said something about, I was like, oh God, she's not gonna like it. But then you said, I've watched it 3 times, and I'm like, okay, I was not expecting that at all.
She's into it now. No, I have an open mind.
I think
except
that
when it's closed.
You look at films as artistic projects, and I think you have a different sort of way that you analyze films. You analyze them as artistic projects, and so I think you analyze it from a different perspective. And so the fact that you think that Graffiti Bridge is some sort of artistic project and has merit, I'm happy.
Absolutely.
And hopefully you can talk about Moonwalker.
I'll have to watch it again. It's been a minute, but I can talk about parts of Moonwalker because I know they were shot here in Portland. So
Were they?
yeah, so some of the stop motion stuff was all done at the Will Vinton Studios, which was here in Portland. And so
I
there's a
wonder
part where Michael Jackson's little character is like running around all these freeways and stuff. That's the same freeway that I drove home on this afternoon. So
why Portland?
well,
That's so interesting.
that's where the studio was for the stop motion.
Wow. And I want to do it in conjunction with, and you can watch it on YouTube for free, both of those, Captain EO, which of course was,
I'm gonna go to the video store. I'm gonna rent it because I'm a good citizen of my video store. I'm a good steward of my video store.
will you remind me of the name of that video store so I can plug it sometimes?
Absolutely. It's Movie Madness Video and More, Portland, Oregon.
Are there a lot of people who are like millennials and Gen Z who are sort of gravitating towards renting again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the Portland Movie Madness was threatened to shut down about 3, 4, or 5 years ago. They raised $250,000 in like 7 days to save the store.
God.
And it became actually a nonprofit wing of the Hollywood Theater. So it's like it is a public service nonprofit. This video store that has 28,000 titles in it, and it has all of the it has all these like crazy props. It's got like the costume from Young Frankenstein. They have the Wizard of Oz's pants. They have Barbra Streisand costumes. They have a shitload of West Side Story costumes. I mean, if you ever get back stateside, we'll have to go.
Oh, what do you mean if? Absolutely. I can't wait.
I'll send you a link to the website and you can go see what all this stuff they have because they have all these crazy props and stuff too. So it's a really great place, and I highly advocate supporting it if you're in the Portland area.
Physical media. I tell people all the time, you do not want to be caught up in the streaming madness.
No.
Because
I mean, Graffiti Bridge is a perfect example. That's one that, would probably not exist if there weren't hard copies of it.
No, it's not on streaming platforms. And I refuse to bootleg. I mean, sometimes you have to, unfortunately, with the streaming era, you have to bootleg. But I want something physical, and but I want, of course, special features, and hopefully the German/British release of Best Little Whorehouse, which is region free, because the lithographs will finally see the light of day. But thank you so much, and I'm really excited for people to see this perspective of Graffiti Bridge and hopefully give it some love that it needs.
Love Graffiti Bridge.
I love it. I will talk to you soon.